Hey, good evening, everyone. It's CJ. I want to welcome everyone to our election night live stream. Very excited tonight to be simulcasting this not only on the Gadfly multi-channel network, but also Rogue News. We have tons of commentary coming at you tonight from several guests, not to mention London Paul, Ken Schortgen Jr., Sonny, Rory Hall, Veles, Gus Demos, and Jim Willie. So I want to welcome you to our live stream, and I'm going to kick it off by turning it right over to Ken Schortgen Jr., who's going to start this. So, Ken, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can kick off the conversation.
Oh, thanks, CJ. Hey, everybody at the Gadfly, and of course our great and illustrious guests, Paul, Sonny, Veles, and CJ. We'll put in the back burner. You know, he's having fun at the campaign headquarters of the Indiana Libertarian. Anyway, everybody, are you excited for what's supposed to be the most divided? Didn't they say that in 2016? The most divided election in history? But anyway, Paul, Sonny, what are your thoughts so far on the what the markets are doing? If you've been paying any attention to it, I know you mentioned that before we got live, Paul. What was going on with the dollar, the 10-year gold, and Bitcoin?
Well, yeah. Well, it's kind of had a bit of a. It was going where, obviously, gold, silver was kind of. I wouldn't call it spiking, but moving into positive territory. The dollar index was obviously moving downwards. There was a big move into the yuan, but it actually in the last sort of 20 minutes or so, spot silver and spot gold have gone negative. There hasn't been really any movement in the dollar index, but there seems to have been a bit of a move out of the yuan. So, and Bitcoin got over 14,000, and now it's back at 13.8. So, I mean, the logical conclusion is if Biden was to win, then I think I could see gold going up $150. Quite easily. So, I mean, the logical conclusion is as we progress to we may see some fluctuation in it, but at the moment it's not. There's nothing. I think it was initially because maybe when the initial. I mean, to be honest, I'm not the best person to talk about the ins and outs of how the U.S. election system works, because for someone from Europe or from the UK, your electoral system is incredibly complicated compared to ours. But because I know you have kind of, when you say you have postal votes, and I think initially because Biden seemed to be ahead in Florida, what happened is there seemed to be a bit of a move into gold and silver. Now, the last I looked, I think Trump's slightly ahead with about 82% of the vote. Have we lost? We gone?
No, we're here.
Oh, we're here. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and Sonny, Veles, jump in if you guys got an opinion at any time. I'm just sort of
please do. Yeah,
fluid monitor. I'm not. I mean, moderator. I'm not here to be formal.
Well, I think CJ is probably the best dressed of all of us right now.
Oh, well,
That's by default. That's by default, Veles.
You're not wearing your normal T-shirt, or I gotta guess what color is the shirt today. I've got my own personal gunny highway in the form of CJ. Yeah, I think right now, the data. We were talking here before we got started. I mean, the data out there is just all over the place. So we need a little while yet to let things gel. We were also discussing that we've got a couple of U.S. states here where we've got returns that seem to be going in one direction, but yet we've got large counties that haven't reported yet. So,
yeah, I'm showing the AP right now. They're showing Texas light blue.
but I mean, it's like 10%, isn't it? No, 16%.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
exactly.
I mean, it's,
and those are pretty much the mail-in, because they'll get the mail-ins and throughout the day they'll be putting them into the machine, but they won't report the numbers until the polls close.
Yeah, and that's going to be obviously a consideration here, especially with both sides pretty much gearing up every lawyer known to humankind prior to this thing, that if we've got states that are close, we just have to adjust ourselves to the fact that that's either going to be resolved with ballot counting later. Although there's a few U.S. states out there. I came across an article earlier where somebody was talking about the various states where it's state law. They must count everything this evening.
Yeah, that's true. And interestingly enough, no matter what the states do, just like when you had the quote unquote recount of Michigan back in 2016, I think it's by December 4th, exactly 1 month, all the electors have to officially be done. So even if they're not done counting, a state has to either say, okay, we've got, here's who we're going, here's our electors. Otherwise, the state doesn't actually count. It won't be a part of the electoral college.
Yeah, we're definitely, for anybody who's kind of a legal wonk or similar in that realm. I mean, this has been an opportunity, folks, to go blow the dust off of state and federal law because we're facing something plans were made by the founders of the country on what to do if we found ourselves in a situation, but it's been a long time since we've been even close to this.
Oh, God,
hey,
yeah,
gentlemen,
I think that. Go ahead.
Gentlemen, no, real quick, I just want to thank Timothy McDade for the super chat. Really appreciate that, and acknowledging the hard work for us bringing this broadcast together. Hey, Sonny, I want to dive into your home state because I think that you, of anyone, can speak about the dynamics occurring there. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your home state and what's going on there so that maybe we can anticipate what your thoughts are in terms of the election outcome there in the Carolinas.
Got it. Yeah. So I'm here in very far eastern North Carolina and in Jacksonville area, which is home to Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune. So in my direct local area, we are very, very much dominated by the Marine Corps, very pro Second Amendment. There are a lot of flags flying in this area. So my individual perspective may be a bit skewed. Certainly if you were to travel to my hometown of Raleigh or any of the other heavily metro areas, Durham, Greensboro, Charlotte, etc., it would probably look a lot different than the Far East or other rural areas. And I suppose it's like that, all over the country. But what has really impressed me, something I've never seen before, I've seen it both locally and then just on the internet, social media, are the Trumpless Trump rallies. That is an extremely impressive phenomenon to have thousands and tens of thousands of people gather for a party, a rally, and the main attraction is, across the country somewhere, not expected to show up. So, that's very anecdotal. It's not necessarily something that you can calculate on, but kind of if you want to test the relative enthusiasm for either candidate, it's going to come down pretty heavily for the red side. And it's a shame that we've got, teams and get kind of speak to it. We've been herded into these polarized options and shouldn't be that way. I use CJ. I've been affiliated with a third party, independent or third party libertarian, basically since I was in college. But that's, not the way that most people think. So we're going to go red or blue tonight. And if you were to ask me, it looks like it'll be red in my area.
Very cool. Very cool. Anyone have any commentary in regards to that and any different perspectives?
No, one of the more interesting things, obviously, North Carolina is always, has been a strong swing state, whether it was Mitt Romney and then Trump and then, of course, this year. But the one that sticks out to me in that area is Georgia. Mm-hmm. Stacey Abrams nearly won the governorship last time, even though Trump won the state by 4 points. and they're thinking that it's going to change mostly because of the Atlanta area. But you have to wonder how much of the black vote in Atlanta really, if that is going to be a big movement. 31% is what they're estimating the African-American vote's going to be for Trump across the country. If that's the case, then I don't think Georgia's really that big a deal.
Actually, just from my perspective, as a sort of outsider to this, in terms of the sort of what I would term the nitty gritty of it, I think if there's anyone else listening outside the US, it's probably worth mentioning that, I mean, we have similar situations in the UK where you have what you might call sort of, we don't have swing states, but you have swing sort of constituencies, and they're normally the things, rather like it does in the US, that determines who ultimately wins the election, because the vast bulk of people always vote one way or the other. And for me, I'm assuming that the kind of the obvious swing states would be Florida, Pennsylvania. If I'm on the wrong track, just let me know. North Carolina, as you said, Texas, Michigan. Would you think Arizona could be a swing state?
Arizona definitely is going to be a swing state, and it was proven last year, mostly because a lot of the people in California have been moving into Texas, Arizona, Nevada, and that's why Nevada. Oh, and Colorado. Back when I was in high school in 1980, up in Montana, Oregon and Washington were pretty much conservative, but all the liberals who moved out of California because of the taxes, they took their politics with them to Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, and they over time became blue. Nevada has become because of the casino influence in Harry Reid, but Harry Reid's gone now. Arizona has received a lot of the Californians, and so has Texas. Austin is, Austin and Houston are the two big liberal bastions of Texas. Everywhere else is pretty much conservative. So, it's definitely a population thing, but mostly it's the California influence.
And how about Wisconsin?
Wisconsin's a funny one. Let me weigh on this one. I've got family up there.
Okay.
Wisconsin's been a funny one because some of the states that were mentioned previously, they have more of what I would almost call an academic American liberal, kind of a university liberal kind of worldview. Wisconsin and certain other U.S. states are more liberal in the sense of traditional union states because of the manufacturing that used to be there, still is there to some degree. So Wisconsin can always surprise people based on the platform of the candidate. They're in my opinion, they're more of a platform, not specific, but a platform influenced kind of state where they really do care. They're not going to necessarily vote for party. They want to see what that candidate has to say, which is why the events of the past couple of months have been, I don't want to use the word interesting, but have been interesting from the perspective of what does that do to the voters there, because of the events in Kenosha and similar.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey, real quick, it looks like Newsmax is called Florida for Trump. 98% of the precincts in. No, it says 98% precincts.
Oh, it's 98%.
Yeah. Rory, you pop in? There he is.
Hey.
Good to see you, man.
Same here. What's going on? I was listening in on you guys, see what's going on, see what all you all were talking about and how it's coming.
There's some little event happening this evening, apparently in the US, so we thought we might chat about it.
Yeah, small event.
Yeah, we're having a big party, and we decided to get our own Nigel Farage over here.
I was just listening to you guys talking about Wisconsin, and I think that what happened in, somebody mentioned the events in Kenosha, and I think that really kind of turned the table for that whole state. And up until then, it was kind of like we're going to, when Biden, said at the very end of that second debate, right there towards the end, he said, we're going to phase out fracking and oil production. And it was that similar thing that happened in Kenosha. Everybody just kind of stood back and went, wait a minute, hold on. This is not what we signed on for. And I think everybody just kind of freaked out. And I think that one singular event in Kenosha, and I don't know, I guess it was Paul that was saying that, or somebody was saying that they have family in Wisconsin. Not Paul.
Sonny.
Yeah, Sonny. I'm sorry.
It was me. It was Veles.
Yeah.
Maybe you probably have a much better insight to it, but it just seems like that. But from my perspective, I'm in Tennessee, and from my perspective, it just seems like that event was just really a moment in time where not only Wisconsin, but really the nation kind of took their breath and really put things into on a different plane completely. At least that's from my perspective anyway.
Well, and you have to remember Kenosha, as you cross into the state of Wisconsin from Illinois, just as you're exiting 295, the highway there that goes around Chicago, the first area of Wisconsin that you come into is Kenosha. So it also opens the door to easy exit from the state if that's what somebody needs to do, versus say going deeper into the state like Milwaukee itself or some of the suburbs up in the Waukesha area or Brookfield, which is where a lot of the executives from corporations and so on live.
OAN just announced that Cocaine Mitch gets to keep his seat.
Oh, Mitch.
Yeah, one of the things my wife and I were watching some of it on TV, and before I came in, and one of the things that she and I both were kind of disturbed at is the fact that they're making these commentators are making these different assessments on what's happening on the ground when there's less than 1% of the vote has been counted. And it's like, how can you make any kind of an assessment on anything with 100 votes? You can't.
Correct. And the other thing too is I'm also noticing, and again, this is very thumbnail, but I'm noticing certain states are going with very low percentages, but it's states that have high electoral counts seem to be trending in a particular direction. I'm not going to throw that out there exactly, but it's I don't know how preliminary we are. I mean, Pennsylvania, we've got 3%, and at least on Fox News, they've got 3% votes counted. Joe Biden at 81% with 3%.
Well, I think some of that comes down to urban versus rural and how quickly the data comes in and things along those lines as well.
Well, and it would be it'd also be interesting to understand for those states that received large numbers of either absentee ballots or mailed-in ballots. I don't really know if one of you are aware, please jump in. I haven't seen anything that indicates whether those have even been counted. And it would probably be on a state-by-state basis based on what the laws are, but I'm deficient in that.
As far as I know, absentee and mail-in are treated the same way. It depends on the state law. Some states will start counting them the moment they're in, put them in the machine, but they won't publicly announce them. Though you do find that certain government officials will start leaking things like, we've got Democrats are here, but they're up, but they don't have necessarily the normal size of voters, that type of thing, the demographics. But there's a number of states that they do not count them until the day of the election.
Correct. I know there are some U.S. states, for instance, that they hold them in a safe place, but they don't count them unless the vote was so close that the election commission says, okay, we need to go count the absentee or the mail-ins.
I know that there's like 5 or 6 states also that don't officially have to turn in their mail-in and absentee ballots until like by the end of the week. There's like I said, there's 5 or 6 states that won't even officially have their final count until like Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's not, theoretically, it's not going to, unless it's just a total blowout on one side or the other, it's not going to end tonight. Not from what I can tell. I may be wrong, but.
Yeah.
On a quick note, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, and Michigan have turned pink. Latest numbers coming in.
USA Today turned them red. Yeah, this, man, I'm telling you, it's like everyone needed to take a sedative before this show. I'm drinking mine. In fact, Paul, I'm half Scottish, so I wish I had something from back home to add to this. But yeah, I was hoping purely from a political science standpoint, we could have something a little bit more certain than what we're looking at right now. But I concur with many of you in your sentiment that we are dangerously close to needing more days after this to just, and then we get into issues of the bona fides of those votes and related.
I mean, what's the risk? I know there's obviously a risk that it just turns into this big legal minefield as well.
Right.
Well, how do I put this? The legal minefield is there, and let's be candid. Both sides have had war rooms that were set up months ago to prepare for this. The other element is, if we follow constitutional rules, and as long as there's nothing unforeseen based on the narrative we knew previously, if this falls to the House, it would probably lean towards the incumbent administration. If we go to the Electoral College, and as long as people follow the rules, then we'll have to see how this turns out. It's why Florida became the issue it was during Bush and Al Gore. And obviously, if Texas or Ohio vote for Biden, that's that's going to set things in unusual directions. My concern
from a
is
historical note.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, from a historical note, people are today and how long it may take. I started talking about the presidential election between Rutherford and Tilden. Ended up, the electoral vote was 185-184. How that happened is there were 3 states in the South, and just coming out decade after the Civil War. So Reconstruction is still going on in the and another country had it being given to, after 10 days, when they finally officially, quote unquote, did it, it was Republican, and that gave him the 185-184. It went to the Supreme Court. There was a big discussion, but the Democrats decided that they would do something called the Great Compromise. We'll let the Republicans have the White House if they end Reconstruction, and that was what ended Reconstruction. But it was a negotiation for the White House, and an evenly matched, divided election.
It's a perfect example, Ken, why I am in awe of your understanding and memory for history. Very impressive information there. Glad to share the broadcast with you.
Actually, Ken, I have
You're
to.
too kind.
I have to agree with Sonny. Well, apart from your historical perspective, but if I'm brutally honest, when I was young, I detested history at school. I mean, obviously, I was more science-based. But the strange thing is, you kind of got me interested in history. And when we're doing this reset book, which is having to churn through a lot of history, I actually started to like it finally. And
The saddest part is,
yeah.
I think most kids, when they go to school, the teachers just, like monotone, Bueller, facts and figures and nothing, whatever. I went to my first year in college, my freshman. We had this old guy. He was like 78 years old. He would go in. He would wear a suit like CJ's doing, and he'd wear a Boston Red Sox hat. Boston Red Sox hat was from like the 1920s, and he would tell stories. He expected you to read the book. First 5 minutes, he said, "Do you have any questions?" Expect you to read the book, and he just tells stories. From a Civil War general who battle had his leg shot off, and he just took his belt and tied around his knee to stop the bleeding, leaned up against a tree, and spent the rest of the day, leading the battle. That to me is where history really, if you can somebody by telling stories, especially stories that relate to what today is, past equals prologue, then you can go ahead and deal with the minutia of dates and facts and figures and this and that. But people have to see history, like Mark Twain, for being an author, he was a great historian, and he told stories, and it's so much better to see.
Actually, I've got this data feed, which which I have for the exchange for all their prices, and it's saying that the turnout's looking very strong for Republicans in Florida, and that's just popped up just 2 minutes ago.
I think they're talking about the potential of this being the most turnout in over 100 years, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Percentage wise.
After the Civil War.
Yeah.
Yeah. We, which is funny because American elections historically have hovered around 50%. And you can definitely, in various, polling locations across the United States, you can definitely see and feel the strain on the system. Just in even people trying to get absentee, or I'm terribly sorry, not absentee, but folks who early voted. I feel like we're all in the Pentagon watching unmanned aerial vehicles carrying out missions. Ooh, that was a hit.
Well, I'd like to bring up a topic, if that's okay.
Please do.
Absolutely.
And that is big tech. And that is obviously something that impacts every single one of us that are on this call, and every person that's listening. It has a direct impact on our daily lives. And the dog and pony show that just recently went on in front of the Senate, there's a lot of bluster, especially out of Cruz, and he got a lot of airtime out of it, which good for him. But do any of you think that if Trump is reelected, that he's going to go after him? And if so, what does that look like? I mean, now Google supposedly is in front of the DOJ with an antitrust situation going on with them. I mean, Sundar Pichai, Zuckerberg, and the Ayatollah, Dorsey, should all be arrested immediately for RICO as well as other treasonous charges. But that's a conversation for another day. What are your thoughts on what Trump will do if he's reelected?
Well, to me, the whole thing really stems around when Google was being put together at Stanford. They needed a venture capitalist. When Facebook, this college dropout Zuckerberg, comes in and steals it from the Winklevoss and a few others, and then of course Dorsey. If you take a look at Dorsey, he looks like he doesn't even know what his business does.
Exactly.
Okay, what does that tell you? That somebody behind the scenes are running all three of the institutions. I mean, look before Pichai, Eric Schultz. Eric Schultz was the globalist. He was really tied to. I mean, hell, he had things going on in North Korea. I mean, Eric Schmidt. He had stuff going in North Korea. Guess who were the venture capitalists of all three of those companies?
CIA, wasn't it?
Yes, the CIA. So the real question is, how are you going to go ahead and go after them when really the CIA is in control, working with the DOJ and the State Department, and you know we're going to see what we had part of the last 4 years, unless Trump gets rid of pretty much he needs to wipe out the entire four levels of the State Department, the DOJ, the CIA, and all of these different institutions, and put in new leadership. Otherwise, you know, some levels of those bureaucracies are just going to keep working against him and working against American people.
Is that possible?
I don't think so. You know, in the end, and I think Paul and I have talked about this before, it doesn't matter if Trump wins and is able to drain more of the swamp than he's done, whatever. He's proven that there's just nobody out there available to put in these positions. I mean, look, he's tried so many different people into these positions. Even Bill Barr is proving to be, you know, part of the establishment protecting it.
Yep.
So who are you going to get to run these things?
Well, it reminds me of, there's a number of books that have been written by, let's see, Birkenfeld, the gentleman who wrote Lucifer's Banker. He was American, but he was working for Swiss banks, and he tried to help the United States government in prosecuting offshore banks and things. There's a couple other books out there on this topic, and they all encountered a problem that kind of circles the drain on what we're talking about, which is that as trying to find an attorney to help them represent themselves, the problem they encountered was most of the major law firms are held on retainer by large banks and large institutions. And that's often the case as well in DC when it comes to any of the folks you're trying to tap. If you look at Barr or Ray or a whole host of other folks out there, they've all done tours of duty at other agencies or big DC law firms. And the question is who really wants to go against that momentum? And it's hard. It's very hard to do. Now, he could bring in outsiders. He brought in Larry Kudlow. I mean, it's funny. Kudlow's always there behind the scenes. Everybody forgets he's there, but Kudlow's still in the administration as a financial advisor. But, you know, short of pulling certain key people out of academia or privately held firms or similar, it's hard to do. It's real hard to do. Now, there's a couple of people he could pull in as attorney general, but we have to see how tonight turns out first.
Exactly. I thought the thing he should have done was grab that. Who was that sheriff up in Wisconsin?
Arpaio.
I think.
Are you thinking of Arpaio and
David Clark?
No, not Arpaio, but that black sheriff who was.
Yes, the African American sheriff up in Milwaukee.
Yeah, put him in charge of the FBI. That would have been a good thing. I personally hope Grinnell gets in charge of the FBI.
That would be a lot of fun. I was thinking that Clark would be a good attorney general. Or is that what you said?
Who? Yeah, Clark. No, Clark is head of the FBI. You know, he's dealt with law enforcement. Arpaio, you know what? I live here in Phoenix, and there were a lot of things about Arpaio we liked, but as he got later, one, he's too old, and two, he's an egoist. You know, he tries to everything he does is to make himself look good, and you really can't. Don't need that.
He's the epitome of the analogy about the Marines. You don't send the Marines in to do police duty, military police duty. You send them in to defeat the enemy. You bring in other people to do that. Arpaio also, I mean, I've also got family in Arizona and equally familiar with, you know, when he started dressing up the convicts in pink and everything else. But he's, you know, he's the kind of guy you needed at that time in Arizona history to do what he did.
Right.
But yeah, I agree with you. He's getting on in age. We've had quite a few investigations into what was going on at his department and other officers. Probably best to move on.
The worst part about here is conservative state, and it's not surprising that it's been just ever so slowly moving to moderate. It's not quite liberal, but it's more moderate. Is the fact that every time we put a Republican governor up, they are corrupt to the core. Fife Symington, you know, with the savings and loan problem. Evan Meekum, who, you know, the used car salesman who was corrupt. And then it allows the Janet Napolitanos of the world to come in. And they just turn that screw and make it a little bit more democratic.
Actually, I'll just jump in. And I've said this before, but it's probably worth reiterating. When it was said to me before Trump it was publicly known he was going to stand for the presidency in 2016, and the exact words were, Trump will win the election provided they don't kill him, whoever they are. But what was said to me at the same time was that during the Trump administration, the sort of big tech companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, will be torn into 1,000 pieces. But for me, the rationale behind why that's still on the cards, and in my own podcast, which I do, I cover this in some detail about this was only probably a few weeks ago. For me, the question is, why are they being broken up? Now, there's no doubt from my perspective on the outside, there are these, you know, Twitter, Facebook's kind of is very much leaning to the left, and it's been very self-evident. But the rationale to break it up shouldn't be on the grounds that, well, it's a political decision in that sense. I think from my perspective, it goes far beyond being a political reason. And by all accounts, what was said to me was it wasn't this decision, why it should be broken up, wasn't on the grounds from a political perspective. So I do think that, and also if you break them up, it doesn't necessarily mean it weakens them. In fact, sometimes when you break up these big things, it actually strengthens them. If that might sound ridiculous, but sometimes that happens. So that would be a concern to me, but I think there's no doubt about it. There has to be some kind of changes to the Facebooks and Twitter, etc. I mean, it's a statement to the obvious.
Well, I think, Paul, if I might, an excellent example of what you're talking about is what happened with Standard Oil in the United States. Mm-hmm. Fought for years not to break it up. It gets broken up into, my history is off, 20 or 30 independent companies, and probably quintupled his earnings by breaking it up rather than leaving as an independent corporation.
Yeah, it created the illusion of competition is what it did.
And in a broader sense with regards to, and I've said this with regards to Trump, assuming he's elected, is there's a lot of Trump supporters who think, well, Trump will just turn it all around. And as I've said, it is a physical impossibility. No matter whether Trump wants to or could, you cannot, one man as a president cannot change all the departments that exist in government that are corrupt to the core. And the other problem you have is if you put someone you think is a figurehead in, whether it's the FBI or in the Department of Justice, the corruption exists beneath it. So therefore, even if you put someone in at the top, how do you root out the corruption through all the tiers within each department? That is, one man again, or one woman, whoever it is, cannot do that within each department. So the problem you have is, because the corruption's so deep, it's so broad as it's long, it's an impossible job. And therefore the argument is, okay, assuming Trump gets elected, and assuming he even has the will to do this, and I'm not saying he doesn't want to or he wants to, but the problem you have is the corruption's so deep, and it's the same in the UK. How do you resolve all these ingrained problems in the political system? It's impossible. I've always come back to the point that what will change everything is, and this goes into the economics, how the West is economically collapsing and financially is collapsing, and until it hits rock bottom, and it's the same in the US, when it absolutely hits rock bottom, then the masses, the hundreds of millions in America or tens of millions in the UK, will demand change, and that's when change will happen. But at the moment, while we're in this situation, it's very hard to see change happening. It's always using my crude analogy. You have to find a ton of manure on everyone's doorstep before people get really angry and want change. And at the moment, there isn't enough of that, but it's coming. And it will happen certainly within Trump's presidency, assuming he's re-elected. And therefore, that'll be the time when I think you'll see big change happening. But again, it's going to take a long time. And people say, oh, let's just raise everything to the ground. You can just get rid of the Federal Reserve. You can get rid of this. You can't do this. It's impossible. Again, you have to have a measured approach to how you tackle the problem. And that's why, for Western nations, the rebuilding process is going to take way longer than 4 years. You're talking 10 years, 20 years before the problems in Western nations are resolved. And as I say, for me, you have to hit the rock bottom before you actually get to the point where, because it's the people that will make things change, not a president, not putting people in off. It's when there is a consensus, and a broad consensus across all American people, or all British people, that we've had enough is enough, this cannot carry on anymore. Then I think you'll see change.
You know, every second decade of every century is a populist movement. You go back to Rome. If 412 it fell. The 18th century, Spanish Civil War. 19th century, we had Napoleonic Wars that ravaged across thing. We had World War I, which saw the breakup of 4 different empires, and then of course we've got now, which the U.S. is pretty much the primary empire. Its downfall is inevitable going through there. But in all cases, you have that division with people, and we saw this in 2008. It started out slow, Occupy Wall Street, and then we had the Tea Party, and then we had the Ron Paul Revolution, then we had the Trump phenomenon. Now we've got Antifa and that breakdown. Because these things don't get addressed by the establishment, when the populists start rising up, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the inevitability is you have the potential for real change for the good of the benefit of people, or you have the Mussolinis and the Hitlers of the world, like we saw in Europe following their breakup.
Good points all. Also, Paul, in your case, I as a student of international affairs, both academically and in my line of work, I've often felt that U.S. high school and college students should be made to watch the British television show Yes, Minister. Because,
yes, absolutely.
Well, because you really want to understand how much the bureaucracy is going to get in your way.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to watch Yes, Minister. I mean, anyone in a Western-speaking country will understand, even without understanding, and I say the vagaries of English politics. I'm sure you feel the same way about us. But anyone from a Western country will understand the dynamic of that program, and it is superb. When he gave, in the early part of the series, when he gave an explanation as to why the European Union had to exist, and he starts talking about, well, we wanted the French in there because we had to enable them to have farm subsidies. The Belgians just wanted to be involved because we located it near them as far as the governance of the EU is concerned. and Germany just wanted to rejoin the human race after World War II. But also to the points about the populist streak, there was some things I picked up in a firm I worked for that did a lot of analysis work for the U.S. government, where one of the researchers we had made a comment to me about something that he didn't put in his report. And his comment was, as he said, since about the late 90s, right around Bill Clinton's administration to now, he said, you're going to see the pendulum keep swinging because the public keeps kind of going to more and more incremental extremes in who is elected to quote unquote get something done. And he said, and the problem is anyone who understands history will know that's going to lead to some very dangerous possibilities as you keep trying to find more and more extreme candidates who might be able to quote unquote fix or get things right.
I concur.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've said this with Ken, and my concern with regards to Trump being re-elected is, for me, from what I would refer to it, and that's just my perspective, there is a kind of far right influence, or to me, that's hijacked the Trump administration, certainly with regards to foreign policy, and it worries me that for me, I think Trump will win. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm reasonably confident that he'll win. Now, assuming he wins, my concern is they may feel more emboldened. Now it's the second term of his presidency. There's no kind of worry about, well, what happens during the first term, because he might not get re-elected. And I worry what it might mean for US foreign policy, but I'm also slightly concerned as to what it might mean for US domestic policy. And hopefully that's not the case, but often with populist movements, and I'm not trying to draw comparisons in history too much, and I have to be careful, I'm not trying to infer that the US turns into Germany in the 1930s by any stretch of the imagination, absolutely not, but I'm also concerned that the UK may fall into this trap, because when all the economic system just collapses, when the financial system collapses and society collapses to whatever degree that is, there's going to be a vacuum, because the vacuum, particularly in the UK, people are going to go, well, I'm sick of mainstream politics, and we're hearing a lot of that. The worry is you'll get something that will try to fill that void as a populist movement, who frankly will be completely incapable of governing. And that will create chaos. It won't last very long, but it will create chaos for a period of time. And I've been slightly concerned as the Trump administration's gone on, particularly the last couple of years, that there is too much of that's filtering through into US politics, and certainly its foreign policy, that's been actually is very detrimental to the US on the world stage. But I'm concerned that then it may seep into domestic politics as well, which would be extremely damaging for the nation, for everybody, whatever political divide or side of the divide you're on. So I'll be interested what other people think about my observation.
One of the funny things there, Paul, when we've talked recently in our little chats, do you remember what the ogre's choice is? No matter if Biden or Trump wins, it's going to be the ogre's choice. Mm-hmm. You can die slowly or you can die quickly. But that's the inevitability of what we're seeing here in the U.S. I think when the dollar loses the reserve currency status, it's going to force a lot of change on the people, and where the populist movement may not get fully addressed, I think external forces like China, Russia, what's going to happen eventually in Europe when they choose a side, the Middle East is going to inevitably force the United States to have to change. And if many of the things that we're seeing here amongst the people and amongst the states, that's either going to get really expanded or it's going to be forgotten real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I agree.
Yeah, please go on, Sonny.
you mentioned that the loss of reserve currency status is what's going to stimulate the change, and that's what it looks like to me as well. I mean, in the way our society is structured, this is our big chance to make a change from an internal direction, and I don't see it happening at all. It looks like same old to me, and from the internal perspective, things are going to just keep on as they were. I don't see any radical change, any arrests, or anything fantastic happening. But that external direction, it seems to me, and I could be wrong, but very recently China has made some huge announcements with the digital yuan, the liberalization of the normal yuan, the freer float, as well as the big plans to stop exporting strategic minerals like the what do they call them? The rare earth elements.
The rare earth metals, yeah.
Yeah, so some big policy changes. And then if you look at the 10-year Treasury, if you look at some flows toward Chinese bonds, different things like that, it looks to me like the rest of the world is kind of starting to kind of make their play on a certain level, and perhaps they're not waiting to see, who wins the election so that they can decide whether to go forward or not, but just possibly, what flavor of going forward is going to look like. Are we going to be dealing with a less predictable hothead kind of guy, or a guy we can bribe in the White House or something like that? But they're probably going to move forward shortly after the election. I don't know. Perhaps that's not a correct read of the situation, but that's what it looks like to me. But regardless, the American people are only ever going to figure it out and demand some significant change when the external stimulus wakes us up from our slumber. That's my opinion.
I think one other just quick point worth mentioning is there's a lot of US financial institutions and US banks are now saying to China, we know you're changing, you're rotating your economy, you're going to have this enormous consumption economy, and we want to be part of it. And me too, and I'm going to focus on Asia, and that's a clear indication if people like him are effectively giving up on the US, that there's a reason for that. And when you have US financial institutions going, we want to set up operations in China. And of course, the big difference is China will say that's fine, but you're not going to play any of the shenanigans you've been doing in your own nation, because we won't tolerate it. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think some of these Western banks are looking at the West going, if we're going to survive, we need to branch out into Asia, not just China, but the whole of Southeast Asia, because we're not going to survive in the US or Europe. It's just because the market will be decimated so badly that the only way we can survive is to move, and they're already doing that, and not enormously, but they certainly want to make inroads. But China is gradually opening its financial markets up, and every market for that matter. But it's a slow process, and they're very reluctant just to turn the taps on, because they don't want to get screwed over by Western institutions equally. But they're certainly wanting to make a move, and US companies don't want to come back to the US. They've made it very clear as corporations they want to stay where they are. And there was talk that they all want to get out of China. No, what they're doing is, because of the pandemic, they've said, well, we need to have supply chains in other countries. So they're staying in China, and they're also putting some operations in Vietnam or other nations, which is a very sensible decision. So you're seeing a lot of the corporations and institutions already telegraphing. They know what's coming, and they're making those changes accordingly. I think that's as significant as China opening its markets up.
Gentlemen, we have a question in the comments that David wants to know that what do the guests see with a Biden win and or a Trump win? What do they see lying ahead immediately then in the long run? So I'll let anyone open up to that conversation about the difference between a Biden or a Trump win.
This is Veles. I have a quick soundbite on that one, and I'll get out of traffic. And Paul, by the way, excellent points about the Asian market, because I remember the late 90s and the tiger economies. And it's a function of demographics. Asia has the numbers. So you can't walk away from those markets completely. There's various forms of chess moves that can be made, but I concur with what you're saying. My 2 cents on the future for Mr. Eubanks' question boils down to one of two things. I'm way oversimplifying, but I'm going to my comments from last week. If Joe Biden becomes president, then it will mean less authority for the United States in the upcoming new financial reset. Well, less of a dominant position, if you will, is my thoughts. If Donald Trump retains the presidency, then he will continue to push for a stronger influence of the United States. Not dominating. There's no way the United States could dominate that new model. But that in a very simplistic way is how I see this going. If Joe Biden wins and whoever takes over for presidency 5 minutes after he's sworn in, it's going to be just one among many in that new economic environment. And I'll also throw out there, I assume various U.S. players will be compensated accordingly. If Donald stays in office, then the United States will have a little bit more of a position. The other thing, too, before I conclude, is there was an excellent comment made some time ago, a number of years ago, about the switch from any kind of dollar-based economic system as we've been living under since Bretton Woods, which is Americans aren't even, and I hate painting with broad brushstrokes, but most Americans are not even remotely prepared for what that means. When oil is denominated in other currencies, you haven't seen energy fluctuations until you've seen what's going to happen in that universe. So with that, I'll retire from the field and let my colleagues take over.
Rory, you got some thoughts? Yeah.
I agree with your comment about whoever takes over from Biden 5 minutes after he's crowned. But I pray to God that he doesn't win. That I pray that Harris does not win and does not become the first communist president of the United States, because that's exactly what we would have. And my fear is that the World Economic Forum that has put together the Big Reset, that I feel confident that they began rolling this out in 2008, 2007, 2008, and during that time frame when they began the change. Because if you remember back in 2009, China immediately went to the IMF and said, we want in the SDR. And it took a few years. And in 2016, they were added to the SDR. And now they have the first functioning digital currency. And in 2015 or 2016, Christine Lagarde at that time said that when Bitcoin went to 19,000 that same year, Christine Lagarde, as the acting managing director of the IMF, said that she wanted to see a working digital currency by 2021. Well, 2021 is in about 65 days, not even. So FedCoin has been tossed around. The CBDC is now part of the landscape, so looks like it's going to happen. Biden presidency would immediately incorporate all of the elements of the Big Reset, the fourth industrial revolution. And I think that a Trump victory would would slow that down a little bit. I don't think that there's a chance that it can be stopped at this point, because there's too many of them. They're too powerful. They have all the money. They make all the rules. And I hope that I'm wrong, but that's what I see. I don't think that the big reset is going to not happen. I think Agenda 21 and the 2030 agenda, I think that they're baked into the cake at this point. Green economy, all of that nonsense, all of it's coming. It's just a question of when. And if Biden gets in, then it'll happen immediately. And if Trump gets in, it'll be delayed a little while.
Is there too much?
Sorry, hello?
No, I turned it down. I think there's too much background noise coming through my mic. You guys hear all the music and everything?
TJ's got to give the groomsman speech here shortly.
Okay, all right. I'll go radio silent.
Yeah.
CJ's got to give the groom speech here in a minute.
Actually, Rory, I'll jump in on this whole Great Reset baloney. It's utter garbage. The World Economic Forum is not making any decisions. What's happened is, it's the classic, and I'm going to take this back because it's this classic scenario. Most people in the West can't grasp the fact that the West is collapsing, that the dollar's going as the world reserve currency, so because they can't accept that this collapse is happening, they go, it must be an engineered collapse. Well, it's not an engineered collapse, because they spent the last decade trying to prevent the collapse with QE, zero interest rate policy, et cetera, et cetera. And it just so happens that the World Economic Forum, and I've got an advantage. I know someone who goes every single year to the World Economic Forum, but is never listed amongst the participants. And their exact words to me is, it's a talking shop of nobodies who never make any decisions. They like to puff their chest out once in a while. The Great Reset is just an idea that they think, oh, this is the way the world's going to go in the future. But the truth is, what do we think China's doing already? The ASEAN nations, the Eurasian Economic Union, 3/4 of the world is now in the multipolar world with the Eurasian axis. They're not going to have any part of any hijacking by the West. And the other problem you have is the West collapsing. Once the dollar's gone, it's gone forever. They can't magically reappear as an empire and go, well, we failed. It's all collapsed, but we're magically going to reappear and say, the dollar's collapsed, but we're going to have a digital dollar, because they have depended on the world adopting the dollar. And the world's rejected the dollar. That's the real reason why the collapse is happening, because the dollar has been rejected for 5 years in the world, and increasingly no one wants a part of it. And of course, when the US started printing trillions of dollars earlier this year, that caused a massive amount of foreign dumping of treasuries and a desire to get out of the dollar and away from the dollar. Well, if your empire depends on the dollar and the dollar collapses and it's gone, you don't have an empire anymore. So I wouldn't be too worried about this Great Reset and somehow, the East is going to go, what, you're going to bully us again into submission? The truth is, the Western Empire was been in collapse mode for 90 to 100 years. It all started prior to World War I. And arguably, in fact, the real Archduke Ferdinand moment in 1914 was the death sentence of the Western Empire. And empires take decades to collapse. The Eurasian axis has been growing and rising for 75 years. We're at a point where, and it's not a dominant empire. We're not saying the East is replacing the US or replacing the West, but the West had its day, it's over. So the people are, because they're terrified of the fact that they can't think the West can collapse, they therefore go, well, it must mean this. They must have engineered the collapse through the pandemic. They must have done all these things, because I can't understand how the West can disappear. There's a lot of people out there who just can't conceive the dollar's going to die and the US will not be an hegemonic power anymore. So I wouldn't be worried about that with respect to Trump and Biden. I think the truth is, internally, the US is going to end up a socialist state on steroids, whoever's president, because by most people's definition, because they're going to have to print money into oblivion just to keep everything going. Everything, in the end, everybody will have to be bailed out, nearly every business, every person, because the whole economy is collapsing. So by that definition, socialism will exist. The only difference is, I think, with regards to Trump, is that Trump, you're right, I think he's more likely to try and stand up for the US interests more than Biden. Well, Biden probably will roll over, assuming he's elected. But the other problem is China and Russia have reached the end of the road with Trump. They've absolutely had enough of it. And you only have to look at the speech of Valdai by Putin and Xi's comments in Beijing recently. They've reached the end of the road with it, because their attitude is, you're constantly trying to undermine us, you're constantly trying to destroy us, you're trying to put missiles on our doorstep, you're trying to invoke color revolutions in Belarus, Moldova, you're trying to cause trouble in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and the list goes on. And they've reached the end of the line with it. The argument on the flip side is, in fact, the US may have a better relationship in the immediate term with Biden, with China, than you would with Trump. Although I don't want a Biden presidency from my point of view, but I've been very clear. I don't see Trump. Trump is not a president to take the US forward. He's great at destroying things, but he's not someone who can rebuild America. I just don't see him as that president. And his role was to take a wrecking ball to everything, and he's doing a great job at doing that, although I'm not entirely sure he realizes he's doing it. But I don't see either president as being capable. Trump's more capable than Biden, but neither of them are really a president who'll rebuild the US. And the question, I don't think you'll see a huge amount of difference internally, because the US is going to be a socialist nation on steroids. Otherwise, if you don't print trillions of dollars, the US collapses, and we've seen that already this year.
Your point is well taken on the printing of money, Paul, because of the inflation function that will be necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I concur completely on that point. I think there's some disagreement or some differences of opinion on the overall narrative, but there are certain mechanics that can't be denied, and that's definitely one of them.
You know, one of the things that also stands out is no matter who becomes president, who wins the House or the Senate, et cetera, the fact of the matter is that American society has changed immensely. And, one of the things that if you watch Fox or CNN or MSNBC or any of them, they keep talking about this suburban woman voter that's going to vote liberal or vote for Democrats. You know why they're picking out suburban women voters? Because here in America, we've got between a 23 to 35% of households are run by single parents, primarily single mothers. This is another one of the reasons why what we're seeing going on in the cities are late stage millennials and even Generation Z, college kids, who really don't have a future. They never had the discipline. They didn't have the things that really are necessary in a two-parent household. Well, like I said, you can vote in Trump, you can vote in Biden. These things aren't going to change. They're not going to change for a good generation. The education system we have, both at the collegiate level and at the primary level, these are so indoctrinated with teachers that don't know how to teach. I was shooting pool in the league over the weekend, and a guy I know who teaches for one of the schools, he was talking about, I asked him, is he teaching with children in class or is he having to do the online thing? And he says, well, for my school, right now we're not even teaching. So they've sort of moved the kids into smaller regional districts. But he said, we haven't gotten a raise in 2 years, this and that. And I said, well, honestly, Arizona is either 48th or 49th worst school system, highest, higher illiteracy rate. So if you're not teaching kids and not providing for them, why should I pay you more money as a taxpayer?
Gentlemen, real quick update. Looks like that Newsmax has given Florida to Trump, polling at 51% with 99% reporting on that. So what's your guys' comment on that?
Well, I think we talked about it when it was at 98% and they'd given them to Trump. That's okay, CJ. We're on top of the ball for you.
Do you know, I've always said I mean, I cannot see Trump losing. Genuinely, I don't see him losing. I mean, well, okay, here's a question, maybe, because you understand US politics. I mean, okay, let's assume that Trump wins Florida. Okay, what really big swings would we have to see for Biden to win? I mean, okay, maybe Texas perhaps, but I don't know. I just don't see when the push comes to pull that Biden will win. So.
All of us. I'm scratching my head on this side of my headphones, thinking, my God, we're getting dangerously close to sounding like the and Paul, for you, the American comedy organization Saturday Night Live, where after Donald Trump won, they showed all these Hillary supporters like at 4 a.m. trying to figure out any mathematical way she might still win or not lose as bad. So it's the whole thing about checking ego at the door. I'm looking at a number of U.S. states at a county level. Now, I know people smarter than me have all these models that let them know, well, yes, I know we haven't counted those other counties, but you look at the numbers over here and it gives you a projection. The thing that's striking me, and it's not to, again, run the risk of buying into, how do I put it, our own biases, but I did not expect Joe Biden to perform this strongly. So then, much like the European example, preaching to the choir, Paul, as you know, in European elections, because I've studied this stuff, you guys have the ability to both vote for and against certain candidates or in certain countries in Europe. So it begs the question, how much of this is a vote for Joe Biden versus how much of this is a vote against Donald Trump?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it's my gut tells me. I mean, if Joe Biden can do this well, where he can't even be aware of what day it is, then the Republicans really need to raise their game for whoever they run as a candidate the next time.
Well, isn't it a point though that Trump won in 2016 because people were completely disaffected with mainstream politics? And that and a visceral to Hillary Clinton. So we're dealing with a similar narrative, which is it's any political scientist has to including our famous University of Michigan, who that's all they do. That's their big thing is political study worldwide. Even they acknowledge that part of Trump's victory was due to a revulsion to a Hillary Clinton presidency. So there are some policy people that need to put some serious thought after they sober up. But there's some serious policy people that need to put some serious thought that if he does indeed retain the presidency, you really need to study, at least from an American demographic perspective, there's some weakness, serious weakness out there that assumptions or various even non-traditional media, alternative media sources, whether on BitChute or other sources, were way too confident going into this. The other thing, too, is, again, not to go into the tinfoil hat universe, but it does kind of make me equally ponder that the results we're seeing in the age-old managing of one's population, no matter what country you're in, if this turns out the way it's going, this allows both sides of fashion to save face. But the real takeaway on that will be once we know what the results were in the Senate and the House.
You know, on the flip side, I noticed I forget what state, maybe it's North Carolina, but there's a Democrat, a black Democrat named Vernon something.
Yes.
He was a House member, I mean, the state level, it appears that he won the his federal House seat, the national election, by a big margin, and he's a big Trump supporter. So as a Democrat, he's going to be voting primarily against Pelosi and the crew. So I just thought that was an interesting caveat.
But does that tough road?
Sorry, say again.
Who, me or CJ?
No, I
you,
don't
Sonny?
know. I heard a voice that was a bit muffled. So
Sonny or Rory?
That was me. I'm sorry.
no, that's all right.
That was Rory. Care to weigh in, Rory?
I'm a little perplexed by Biden showing as strongly as he is, because I agree with what was just said, and the fact that he can't hardly remember what day of the week that it is, but yet he is somehow managing to garner all this support. One of the things that I found interesting back in 2016 was as soon as the election was over here in Nashville, every one of the voting machines were changed. I can't even get a receipt today of my vote. I can't know that my vote was counted. I can't know that my vote was counted correctly or the way that I wanted it to. And I've said for the past few days that either the Republican Party was going to absolutely crush the Democrats on all sides, or the system, the electoral system, is rigged beyond repair. And I think what we're seeing is that it is rigged beyond repair, because I'm seeing that map that CJ keeps putting up, a lot of blue that should not be there. And whether it's light blue at this point or completely a vote for Biden, there should be almost zero blue on there, because this person is obviously, I mean, if you just go back just a few months, if you go back to the beginning of the year, you would see that you could hear in his voice that Biden is coming apart at the seams mentally. What's he done in all this time in office? What's he done besides nothing? The corruption alone that's come to surface over the past few weeks, and the laptop from hell, that in itself should have buried him, but it didn't. Why? Because corporate media, the CIA Mockingbird media, didn't report on him, and including NPR putting out a statement saying this is publicly funded news company that put out a statement that said, we're not going to cover it, period. We're just not going to cover it.
Right.
And it's like, you're just not going to cover it, huh? You got nothing to say? Not that it's wrong. You're just going to weigh in. And the things that have come out, I don't care about any of the sexual deviance. I want to look at the treason. Let's look at the treason been committed.
Hey, I'm doing a quick mic check. Can you guys hear me? You're still getting all the music in the background.
Yes.
No, it's a lot better.
Is it
Yeah,
a lot better now?
now.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I switched my headset over. Great commentary so far, and want to thank all the people tuning in to our live stream on the multi-channel platform. So whether you're listening to the Gadfly or Rogue News, and yes, Be the Guerrilla Economist is going to be joining us. We have Cuss with Gus is going to be joining us. We have Jim Willie still waiting on deck to come in, and really appreciate everyone being here, and also the contributors, Veles, Rory, everyone, Ken. Everyone's making great comments tonight in regards to what's transpiring. But I'll let you guys continue the conversation. I want to let you know that I'm still alive. I'm still here. I haven't had too much tequila yet, but there's still plenty of tequila to drink. Go ahead, Ken. Take it away.
Hey, Rory, in reference to, you can call, if you just do a Google search, I know Google, 2020 presidential election results, this will pop up right on the first page, the Associated Press, the same chart we're seeing on the screen. But if you pull it up on your browser, then you can put your cursor over any of the states and it gives you the updated. You don't have to click on the states, just it'll give you the updated. One of the things that you always find is they will do the when usually a Democrat in a probably going red state, say like Texas or North Carolina, those or Ohio, the mail-in ballots are always going to be first. Usually these are states that have counted them as they came in versus waiting the day. A lot of the different counties, of course, they have to tally up and then go, put in. Right now in Texas, it's 100,000 vote difference. No, actually, it's 80,000 vote difference, 61% reported. So you got most of the mail-in ballots. And what I think they're doing, because if you remember watching at least Fox back in 2016, Donald Trump got out to a lead when the early states that they projected, and he pretty much stayed ahead for the entire night. What I've noticed on just about every station and here in the AP, New York Times, etc., is they've jumped Joe Biden into the lead early on and kept him ahead. They've done the exact opposite. It's like they're trying to push this narrative. When I see North Carolina, when I see Texas, when I see Pennsylvania, or we may not see Pennsylvania for a while, but when I see those really start to click over and start to move, I mean, right now, Wisconsin and Michigan, early on, they're pink. So they're on the red side. It's going to change back and forth, depending on the thing. In regards to what you were saying about Biden, yeah, there was a poll that came out late yesterday. 57% of those who are voting against Trump or are voting Democrat said they're doing it not because they support Biden, but because it's an anti-Trump vote. 57%.
Well, and again, one of the states you mentioned, Ohio, you've got roughly 60% of the vote is counted. And if you look at the actual voting tally, it's neck and neck. There's a couple of counties that haven't reported yet. And granted, they have small voter populations. But yeah, let's not jump to conclusions. Let's deal with reality as it is. But at the same time, we got quite a lot there. And, the other thing, too, is I'm sure some of you saw the numbers of they had two bar graphs. I forget which news service had it, but they showed that in the 2016 election, you had half of the votes were cast in person and half were the traditional absentee ballots. And in this election, like 2/3 of all cast votes are either absentee ballots or mail-in ballots.
Gentlemen,
so,
you better back up because we have a gorilla in the house. B, what's up, brother?
What's up, boys? What's up? Yeah, the Ohio thing, I was just listening to you guys. I was touching base with a couple of my guys that do some data analytics. There are some counties in Ohio. It's going to run. It's tightening up. It's tightening up. The trend right now, I think it is going to close for Trump. I think we're going to probably grab it by about 2 or 3 points. I'm not going to be freaking out over that. There's some blue counties there that are going to be turning a little bit more lighter shade of blue. Yes. I think the one to watch right now, I keep a lookout for Georgia. I'm seeing how that develops. I'm a little concerned about Georgia. Georgia, we need to lock up Georgia, and I think Florida's in the bag at this point. I'm not concerned about Florida. In terms of Biden, I think this is it. I think he's blown his load. Only other thing he's got left to carry is California. That's about it. And we'll see how the rest of this evening plays out. But it's going to be tight. It's definitely going to be tight. And then, of course, Pennsylvania, which is turning out to be quite interesting. And then you got the idiocy that's happening in Dallas, Texas, and Houston, which they are, it looks like at this point, voting against their own interests. So we got some wild cards and some nail biting. But let's see what happens. I think we could eke this out.
V, one of the questions, a great question that came up earlier and before you get joined in was in regards to what does a successful Trump re-election look like in the first 90 days, the first 6 months. What does he need to do to turn this ship around? And I think B left. He must not like my question.
Fire Fauci.
Fire Fauci.
First thing he's got to do. Well, see, the thing about it is Biden's been pushing the COVID. That's really his thing. He hasn't really pushed the economy. He's had to answer about China. He's been pushing COVID. I've got the plan. I got the COVID. Fact of the matter is that Trump really can't do too much. It's all been the states dictating and mandating what happens with COVID. And hopefully most of the individuals who are voting, most of the people realize that. But the second thing about it is if people are relying upon a president to mandate their health choices, then our country is definitely far worse than we could ever imagine.
That's an excellent point.
Well, in my opinion, I think one of the opportunities. Here comes B. He's back. Hey, you back?
Hey, sorry about that. Yes. What was your question, CJ? What is the first 90 days?
Yeah, my question, it was posted earlier in the comments in regards to if Trump gets reelected,
right?
Which it looks like at this point, it looks like it's pretty strong that he's going to. What does a successful Trump candidacy re-election look like in the first 90 days, 66 months? What does he need to do to turn the ship around?
Off the bat, he can't waste time. First 4 years, I get it. He was being assailed. There was a lot of narrative framing that occurred. I think at this point, and at that point in the first 4 years, he was still a bit of an unknown quantity in terms of how people viewed him. This time around, we kind of know who Donald Trump is. We know what he's about. And I think what needs to happen is he has to come out of the gate. Look, Christopher Wray's got to go. Haspel's got to go. A whole bunch of career bureaucrats have to get whacked. They got to get fired. We need to immediately put in place an infrastructure development program, ASAP. That is so vital in terms of creating the jobs, in terms of getting this country going. I mean, so many things have set up in terms of scaffolding, in terms of the foundations needed. When you look at the opportunity zones, when you look at the deregulation, $3.5 trillion of regulations that have been cut, the red tape that has been severed and shredded, allowing for creativity to spring forth. So he can't waste time. There cannot be any dilly-dallying. I'd say fire Barr. He's got to go as well. He needs to get killers. He needs to get guys who are in there, who are ruthless, who knows what they're doing, and they're not beholden to career bureaucrats. They're not beholden to special interests. They're not beholden to deep state apparatchiks. If he can do that, then this country stands a chance. If this second term winds up being like the first term, then, brother, at the end of the day, he's just buying us time.
Hey, real quick.
Hey, Ken.
Betfair, there's a number of different betting sites out there. The odds have just switched into Trump over Biden.
Boom.
Now, the question is, what does the money know?
Wall
Street's also going more. The Dow is down about 150 points, I think. So I think more and more they're seeing the real numbers, not what's sort of being pushed here. And
but they're not suffering through the delay the way we are.
Correct.
Yeah, but it's also worth noting the smash on silver and gold continuing. The dollar index is recovering. The 10 years being bought very heavily. It suggests to me they think Trump's going to win.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, okay, this is only my gut feeling. I think Trump's winning. He's going to win. I don't have very little doubt now that he'll win.
Yeah.
How much more difficult, gentlemen, does it be for Trump to legislate and manage through a potential stronghold with the Democratic-led Congress and Senate? Right now, we're looking at election results. Now, granted, this is...
we lost a Senate seat, TJ.
I'm looking at it right now. It looks like the Democratic Party, it's 51 for the majority, Democratic are 40, Republicans at 38. We still have to keep that. We still have to keep that in play as far as looking at that. That's very significant, who controls the Senate and the House.
Well, yeah. Otherwise, you've got a lame duck president.
Anyone else? Veles, Sonny, anyone else want to chime into that as far as the legislature? And how does Trump successfully navigate through a potential-led Democratic House and Senate?
Well, here's the thing: you can't lose the Senate. The Senate. I mean, we just lost a Republican senator today. I don't know if you guys caught that. It was the I forgot who it was. The guy Charles Warren from Colorado. He was a senator from Colorado. He just lost it to some bootlicking communist who just who just won in Colorado.
John Hickenlooper.
Yeah, Hickenlooper. I mean, right there, he's got a commie last name, Hickenlooper. He spent a lot of time in the bathhouses in Chicago. He's quite good friends with Barry over there, Bathhouse Barry. But that's the point. We cannot bleed seats in the Senate. Now, the House is a toss-up. We it'd be nice to gain. But if we could hold the line in the House and gain in the Senate, then it will be successful. But if you lose both houses, if both houses flip blue, then the only thing that could, throw a monkey wrench into all of that is that, hey, all these rumored and talked about scandals that have been happening with, a good majority of American politicians, that needs to come to the surface, and there needs to be some resignations and, dare I say, some arrests. But that's the wild card. That's the Hail Mary play. That's the pie in the sky. That's the moonshot. And it terrifies me that we're to the point where we're hoping for the moonshot to occur. And that's kind of that's the the far-flung idea here. But am I gone?
No, you're good.
Because on my screen everybody disappeared. I'm just by myself.
All eyes on you, B. All eyes on you.
We're just giving you the floor, man.
You sexy gorilla.
Sorry. So that's what it is. It's like it worries me, and I think Paul and Ken and Veles, these guys could agree with me as well. Is that if the only thing that could turn us around is a Hail Mary play, miracle from God, that's worrisome because that's pie in the sky. That's really out there. You see what I'm saying? So there's got to be some bearing on logic. I hope to God that we don't lose the Senate. That's what I got to say.
Yeah, simply as the lawmaking body of the government, I would also offer that somehow psychically, and Paul, I'm assuming I know what you would think about that. That's a joke. I'm kidding. But
No.
where I'm going with this is Americans always vote for deadlock, and we've been voting for deadlock for 25 years. So if Donald takes it, he's an outsider to the traditional political system. And now that the leash is off, because he doesn't have to worry about a second term, and they've already impeached him once, they could try a second time. But, will you see some rather aggressive and burn bridges moves by him? Probably. Are there a number of soft Democrats that he could rely on? Because there's always a tchotchke can be thrown their way. But there's a lot of unknowns. And, as we've been saying all night, we got to wait for these numbers to finish. We got to wait for these votes to get counted. Colorado, I just looked at the numbers, V. You're absolutely right. That was a wide enough margin. I don't know how the hell the other candidate's going to pull that one back. But yeah, it's okay. You got a margin, but is it 1 or 2 votes? Is it more than that? Are these hardcore ideologues? I mean, one of the things that's been discussed on Rogue News a number of times is we've had like what happened with AOC. AOC during the primaries, one of her endorsed candidates beat a Kennedy in Massachusetts. That's frightening because you would have to have a candidate that's more extreme. And that candidate won. So the question is, how many of these other folks who've come in, are these moderates who wear a political badge because that's how they got into office? Are they hardcore ideologues like AOC and the rest of the squad? What are their allegiances, et cetera? But I mean, that's, for those of you playing the home game, that's why anybody in Washington, D.C., and I've been there during elections. I've been in bars and stuff in Washington, D.C. during elections, and that's when the notepads are out, strangely enough, because nobody wants to write down anything. They've got their laptops open. They're monitoring how the election results are coming in, and every obscure election known to man is being monitored. But everything they write down is on a notepad because they don't want, even if their computers get hacked, they don't want that data getting out. But this is where you've got the White House teams and possibly the Biden camp. You've got teams of people right now watching these elections trying to figure out, is that a hardcore ideologue? Is that a moderate? Is that person, regardless of their Democrat credentials, more affiliated with business interests? Is that Republican, actually a Republican in name only? And that's where everybody starts figuring out what are the new balances of power.
Now,
I think Go ahead, Ken.
Okay. Have any of you guys read and or aspired to The Fourth Turning? That
Yeah, I've heard
everything
of that
goes in 80-year cycles, and 4 different quadrants every 20 years. There's change. We're at the 60-year point of the 1960s. That was really the last time we saw this radical activism by the youth.
Right.
Obviously there was it was the civil rights, it was feminism, it was gay rights, it was anti-war, it was a whole number of things. But one of the things that stood out is on college campuses, there were a great number of students who were running around with their copies of Mao's Little Red Book.
Yeah.
They were thinking communism back in the 60s. As a matter of fact, if you go back even to the 1930s during the Great Depression, who was the author? John Steinbeck, In Dubious Battle, a number of these different books, they were talking about the rise of communism as an alternative to the system, that we have. Obviously, when you got into the 80s and the 90s, where the markets were up, jobs were up, everything was looking good, you don't have that type of activism or rebellion. But since 2008, that rebellion has come back, and it should be no surprise we're seeing this move towards communism. One, because they don't teach what capitalism really is, and the fact that we haven't had capitalism for probably more than 100 years. But the thing is that you wonder when coming out of this what we're going to see and what we're going to be. And it goes back to what I was saying. It doesn't matter who wins presidency. It doesn't matter who's in Congress. We got the Pelosi's, the Maxine Waters. We got the McConnells. They're all in their 70s and 80s. Who's going to be taking over the leadership and the power roles over the next decade? It's going to be the millennials. It's going to be some of these Gen Xers or Gen Zers on the cusp, like AOC and this and that. And their viewpoints are going to really radically change the country no matter what we have over the next 4 years.
Ken, are you daring to ask what sort of world we're leaving for Keith Richards?
Keith Richards is going to join Bruce Springsteen and go to Australia.
Well, and to your point, I mean, historically, yes, that was in Hollywood and academia and so on. There were various folks dabbling in different flavors of socialism of one variety or another, which is what kind of got fleshed out during the McCarthy hearings. But yeah, your comment is they haven't really taught in American universities what the free market really is, and conversely, they haven't really taught what Marxism or communism is. I've always found it funny when I look at these supposed leaders of these various militant organizations in the United States who keep talking about, well, we are avowed Marxists or whatever. And it's like, I've got chain-smoking French professors that would spit in your face because in their universe, you're not Marxists. Because first of all, if you were Marxists, you would know it's a dialectic of history and it's going to happen anyway. So you fiddling with it doesn't do shit.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about it is there's no such thing as pure capitalism. There's no such thing as pure Marxism, because pure Marxism, there is no rulership. There's no leadership. People just are one big community that all thinks the same way and they all act the same way and they have the same ideas. Really, every communist country out there, the Soviet Union, Russia, China up to a point. What we see.
No, but to be fair, China's not communist at all.
Okay. They're socialist.
Not now.
Right.
It's
but
a
I'm talking political.
socialist mix.
Right. No, I agree.
And that's a big problem that with the West and the US particularly. The average American thinks China's like it was 30, 40 years ago. And then when Americans go to China, they're like, hang on a minute, why the hell is this? This is better than the country I live in. And this is a big problem. China's not been communist for a long time. And in fact, it gets the mix of capitalism, socialism from their perspective, right? And going forward, I could not, I'm not suggesting everyone has a Chinese system, but we're going to have a mix of capitalism and socialism, real capitalism and socialism for nations to work. We've tried everything else and it's failed. And going forward, logically, that is what nations will start to adopt. I'm not saying like China specifically, but you always have to have that mix. You can't have, or you certainly don't want socialism, but you can't have just capitalism. It won't work.
I agree with you, Paul. I didn't get a chance to finish that. I wasn't picking on China, because if you think about it, Mao's China was an attempt at communism. Pol Pot attempted communism. But the fact of the matter is, communism really, every single time it's out there, is a socialist oligarchy. And that's why I laugh at Bernie Sanders. When an old rich guy tries advocating for following socialism or communism, the only reason he's doing that, do you think he wants to give up 90% of his wealth? What do you expect everybody else to do? No, he wants to be part of the Politburo that rules over the proletariat. That's exactly what they do. The fact of the matter is that America is a fascist nation. And
yes.
I mean, the difference between socialism and fascism is the government determines the production and distribution. In a fascism, corporations have merged with the state and they determine it. Yes, and all you got to do is go back to real quick. Go back to under Obama, when they had the first government shutdown. On the second day of the shutdown, Obama did not invite John Boehner, the Speaker of the House at that time, to come to the White House and try to solve it. He brought in 15 bank CEOs, and those bank CEOs were telling Obama how this was going to work out.
Yeah.
Do you think, though, look, I only look at this from the outside. I think there's this, at times, people get, when in the US, it's like, there's this real deep-seated fear that somehow communism could ever become part of the fabric of the United States, and I cannot conceive that would ever happen.
Right.
And I think part of the problem at the moment is with how the world is, and we talked about this, the way this sort of anti-Chinese sentiment that comes out, particularly out of the Trump administration. I think there's Americans who think, well, if Trump doesn't succeed, the Chinese are going to take over, and we're going to have, whatever they think China does inside China, which isn't the case. But that's never going to happen either. What do they think? China's going to invade America? I mean, I think sometimes for me, I don't want to tarnish people with the same, but I think there's a bit of a paranoia in the US about things that just aren't a reality. And what I've seen in the Trump administration is he's picked on China and he's picked an argument and he's lost. But the point is, it's just creating this idea in the US that, well, if it's not this, it's this. And I think that in the long term, if the US wants to recover and genuinely recover, it's going to need to get over these hang-ups it has about things that aren't a reality and actually deal with the reality of what the United States can be, instead of worrying about the fact that somehow there's going to be communists taking over the United States or extreme socialism. I mean, it's just, I don't know why. I look at it and I just think there's way too much fixation on something that's just never going to be a reality.
Didn't you hear, Paul? The Chinese are going to invade the United States through Canada.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's this kind of, it's never going to happen.
No. It also reminds me of actually the American author Paul Harvey did a story about how the Canadian Prime Minister had to inform the British government in 1921, I think it was, that Britain still had plans to quote unquote retake the colonies until 1921, and the Prime Minister of Canada had to go back home and explain, you have no idea how vast that country is and how many people they have. There's no way. We're just going to have to live with them. There's no way we're taking back North America. And it's the same thing. A actual invasion of the United States, my God, it's completely unfeasible.
Yeah, you can't.
Well, they'd never do it anyway, because I mean, I mean, it would just be utterly futile. I mean, it would
Well,
be
they need our
probably
natural resources. I mean, wouldn't it be better just to negotiate a trade agreement and call it a day?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that, for me, the one of the biggest concerns I have with US politics in the last 4 years is, looking from the outside, the US never looks more divided. And the problem is the US needs to be united going forward if it's going to get out of the mess it's in within the next decade. If it stays this with everyone at each other's throats for all manner of reasons, it's got no chance of succeeding. And
Concur
that is
completely.
and I fear. I mean, it's the one thing. Yeah, if Trump's elected, which I'm assuming he will be, but okay, let's just assume he is. I don't see any of that unity coming into the US. In fact, I think the divisions will get worse and worse and worse. And as the economy gets weaker, the US loses its dollar reserve, world's reserve currency status. The divisions will get worse and worse and worse. And I don't see Trump winning the election and pulling the country together. And if you don't have a president that does that at this time, you're going to have major problems in resolving the acute problems the US faces, because its empire or its superpower status, whatever you want to call it, is gone. It's over. It can be a great nation in the future, as I've said, amongst equals, and it will be one day, but it has to accept the days of hegemony is over, etc., etc. And you need a president in these situations to unify it, because as the economy collapses, I can guarantee Trump will blame China. He'll blame anyone except the reality of what's unfolding. And in the long run, how is that going to help the United States recover? It's not. And that's why, looking from the outside, you don't want Joe Biden as president, because, as you say, he'll last 5 minutes and someone else will take over. But I'm not confident Trump has the capability to unify the people. And if you don't unify the people, and as everything starts to melt down, you just go, I fear that's when the whole nation descends into chaos.
You bring up an interesting point, Paul, which is both as an outsider, but someone who understands and when I say outsider, I mean really outside, but someone who understands the American political system as a friend across the pond, which then goes back to our earlier discussion around the whole 90-day window. I mean, that becomes then part of the 90-day window, which is any prudent or reasonable member of the administration, whether they're in the shadows, like the gentleman I mentioned earlier from CNBC, or other folks that are more out front, then there has to be part of his administration that takes that into consideration. Because for him to be successful, then there has to be ways to reach out. Now, some of those that he attempted during his first administration blew up on the tarmac because everything became militarized. But the other thing is I think in the self-interest of other parties, which is true of politics everywhere, they have to internalize there's no restraint now. He has no second election to worry about. And he's not a man who's going to care too much about his legacy, not like other U.S. elected presidents. So that being said, it's in your best interest to try and negotiate something with this guy. But there needs to be somebody on his administration who has that job. Any more conflict in this country between the effects of COVID lockdowns and just the general resentment, as well as the demographic problems this country is dealing with, can't continue. I mean, it could, but it would have disastrous effects for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a question that Paul posed to me probably about 2 months ago. The knee-jerk reaction for somebody like me is when he asks this is, "What? No, wait a second, you're wrong. But I ended up taking about a week, and I really started mulling over what the real question is. And the question was, he said, the American Constitution no longer works for the U.S. And like I said, my first knee-jerk reaction is, how dare you, But then I started thinking, the Constitution was put into place when we only had 13 states, 13 colonies, 13 states, a smaller population, and everything was in one region. when the Federal Reserve was put in, there were 12 regional banks, and for the longest time, each of those regional banks had its own interest rates for that region, because up in the Northwest and that, it was the mining. In the Midwest, it was the meat packing. Down in the South, the Atlanta Fed was more cotton and other agriculture. Every region in the United States has a different economy. Every region in the United States has different people. Every region in the United States has different political thing. That's why the Midwest and the Mideast, for the most part, is just one big red, while the coasts are all blue. And I really started thinking about the fact that the Constitution in itself is pretty much, it works, but because because government has to be run by people, in the end, every type of government ever created fails. And I'm wondering if the inevitability over time, in maybe just in a short period of time, is that the United States actually breaks into about 5 different regions ruled autonomously by its own quote unquote constitution.
Well, do you know what's funny you say that, Ken? It was said to me 2004 or 5. When I had discussions with various people about a lot of things, and of course, at that point, for me, 2005-06 was when I saw the end of the Western financial system, the big creaks happening, and it was said to me that there was a belief at some point that the US could be broken up into 4 or 5 regions. Now, is that a coincidence given what you've just said? Well, maybe it is, and maybe it will never happen, or maybe it will. But yeah, the US Constitution just doesn't work anymore. And I'm not saying you rip it apart and destroy it, but it has to be fit for purpose for the next 100 years or something. And it's clearly, self-evidently doesn't work anymore.
Now, when you guys say it doesn't work anymore, what aspects are you referring to that doesn't work? I think the Constitution works great. What happens is you got idiot politicians and lawyers who dice it up 6 ways from Sunday that convolutes and makes things completely convoluted and bloated and inefficient. The beauty of the Constitution, if you look at it from a point of view, you have something that's a centralized government, you have more anarchy. The founders really placed the Constitution towards more of an anarchist, more decentralized. Hence, the country's harder to control. It's harder by design for an outside power to come in and dominate it, and or an inside power to come in and subvert it. It's very difficult to do, as we're seeing this election being played out tonight. So I think the problem is not the Constitution itself. I think that what needs to be done is the political system that we have with congressmen and senators, lifetime politicians, rules, regulations. Those are the things that need to be hacked away with. There's such an inefficiency within the system itself that oftentimes we look at the ineptitude of the system and think that that's the Constitution. When in reality, it's really not.
Let me answer your point, V, with something that Benjamin Franklin, coming out of the Second Continental Congress, said when a woman came up to him and said,
"Yeah, it's a
what
republic
did you give
if
us?
You can keep it.
If you can
Yes.
keep it." And
Yep.
and what is
That's
it
the
that
problem.
what is it that the I remember Tip O'Neill, I think he said this more than anything, all politics is local. We no longer are a state primarily run power system with a small federal government. The federal government pretty much dictates and mandates pretty much everything. That's why the Constitution, it no longer works for the country in its current state, because it was never supposed to be a federalist type of country. It was supposed to be the states deal with it as they see fit. And this is one of the things that people have a hard time when it comes to the elections. According to the Constitution, the states run the elections. They can do whatever they want. Now, of course, you have the Federal Election Board or whatever the agency is, but in reality, Constitution limits what the federal government can do. If Pennsylvania wants to do everything mail-in ballots and ballot harvesting, guess what? They can do it.
Yeah. You know the problem is, man, the Constitution, the founders and the framers created for us an amazing system for a morally upright and vigilant citizenry, which we are not anymore. And that is the problem. The problem is the Constitution was framed for adults. We are become a nation of babies. And that's the biggest issue. We've lost the culture.
And that's why so many people are wanting communism, because they no longer want to take responsibility for their own actions, and they need somebody to be that nanny state.
Yep.
Okay, but here's the problem with it's. I agree with you. You can argue it's a very strong argument to say that you want states to have individual power to do what they want to do. But the problem with that is the US is going to need a coordinated response across the entire country to get through what's coming. And you're going to have states fighting their own corner. You're going to have neighboring states fighting their own corner that may completely block infrastructure projects or all manner of things. And nothing will ever get done. Absolutely nothing. And until you have whether you have to have a situation for a period of time that says, okay, we're going to have to slightly change how we do things. But the reason why the US doesn't get things done is precisely because of the fact that I accept your point, V, regarding the fact that the federal government, state level, and why you don't want that. But going forward, the US needs a centralized approach that says, right, we need to do all these things. That means all you states are going to have to get on board and do this, but you're not going to have that. So while all the states are squabbling with each other and won't cooperate, nothing gets done. And unfortunately, that at the moment, that will paralyze the United States until suddenly the states, and what's the point having a president who actually is nothing more than a figurehead? Because at the end of the day, you rightly say states can say, well, we're not doing X, Y, and Z. Well, that's fine. And when it works, it works. But when it doesn't work, it fails miserably. And for me, looking from the outside, it's failed miserably for a very, very long time. So how do you address that? Where you keep the Constitution as it is, and you don't have all the states cooperating with each other because they have a different agenda, different mandate, different belief in how things should be done. But the United States won't work like that going forward, because it will never. It's a bit like, like I used the analogy before about the Dutch government. They've got so many political parties, and nothing ever gets done in the Netherlands because they're all fighting their own corner. So at the end of the day, nothing happens. Well, that's the same principle you have in the US. So how do you change that unless you change the Constitution?
Well,
Paul, my excellent. Go ahead.
Now, what I was saying is, again, that comes down to a cultural thing, right? We're supposed to be 50 small mini countries within a larger union. And what happens is that we've become we say, oh, yeah, we're capitalists. We're not. Because look at the infernal state that I live in, which is New York. They're literally hedging on a Biden victory to get a government handout in order to make up for the lack of a mismanagement that has occurred for decades. You have so much waste, mismanagement. The way you fix this country, in fact, there's no way to fix this country unless you kill the bureaucracy. This system of the Constitution is designed for a very lean, very efficient, very decentralized, very responsible way of governing. But look at it. Economically, we've gotten rid of the gold standard. Economically, we introduced the central bank, where now the damn central bank is, if it stops stimulating our real estate market, it's going to implode. If it stops stimulating the stock market, it'll implode. If it stops stimulating the bond market, it'll explode. It's stupid. We don't have an economy. It's fake. So all of it, you culminate with the fact that that everything from the foundation to the topmost stone is a giant corporate welfare state. And that's the problem. And this is what frightens me. Yeah, Trump needs an infrastructure bill to re-stimulate the economy. But how the hell are you going to manage it with this how are you going to get anything done, Paul? And I agree with you. How are you going to get anything done with this bloated bureaucracy that's in place? It has to get killed. And I don't know how to kill it. I really don't know.
Yeah, unless, but I think the problem as well is in each state, you've got all this ridiculous bureaucracy. So you're creating 50 bureaucracies in the United States as well. And that's why I'm saying that aspect, most of the Constitution, leave it alone. But when it comes to how all these states integrate and how you're going to map a future and how you're going to rebuild America and make it a great nation amongst equals again, something has to give. And the way it currently is structured, I can guarantee you could spend 5-10 years where everyone's squabbling and nothing gets done. And so therefore something has to change in that regard. Now, whether that you tweak the Constitution, but you have to do something. And at some point there's going to have to be central planning that says we need to do all these things. And we're going to have to spend the next decade doing this. And all these states are not going to be, as soon as like Trump goes out, someone else comes in and goes, well, I'm, in such a state, we're getting rid of this. We're not allowing that infrastructure to be built, and kiboshes the entire project.
Right.
That's an enormous problem.
And that's where I agree with you, Paul. And this is where every American household should have this conversation amongst themselves in their table while eating lunch or dinner. How the hell are we going to fix this country with this bloated bureaucracy? Because nothing will get done, even if you have an efficient leadership from the White House on down. These idiots that are in these respective states and these self-interest groups, they got to go. How do you get rid of them? I don't know. I have no idea.
Paul, the one thing I was going to say, we've had this division before. That's why we had a civil war.
Yeah, we don't want that again.
because half the states,
that's not a bad idea.
Half the states didn't want to have to deal with the manufacturing North that had a dominion and control, because the agricultural South. In the end, the thing about capitalism is you have to have sound money, and you're not going to have any rebuilding, any real economic change in this country until you go back to sound money. So that's number one. Everything else is because who's going to accept the dollar? But with that being said too, everything's more sophisticated today. Back at the time of the Civil War, more than half of the country was rural. There was a good chance that
Trump just took the lead in Ohio. Trump just took the lead in Florida, and he took the lead in Pennsylvania. Boom.
Yeah.
Like I say, don't panic. It'll work.
Yeah, exactly. And he's only like 4,000 away from North Carolina with 87%. So,
God love you, Paul. I'm here in the UK, and I'm telling you it's fine. Take it easy. Have another drink. You're fine. Everybody chill the hell out.
Yeah, but right. I mean, back in 2016, I didn't stay up to listen to it all, but I woke up about, I think it was my time, sort of 2:00 in the morning. And I looked at my phone, looked at the price of gold, and went, Trump's won, I'm going back to sleep. Because gold had a huge spike, and I knew I didn't need to watch anymore. And I understand it's very different from if you're living in the country and you're concerned about what a Biden presidency is. And for all the concerns I have about Trump, I've always stated it's far more important he becomes president than Biden. But I think when it's a bit like when push comes to pull, I think at the end of the day, enough people will vote for Trump because, okay, there's a protest vote.
Trump just took a massive lead in Georgia, 55% of the vote to 43, and that is with about 65% of the votes already in. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I mean, obviously Texas has gone red as well. Okay, there's only there's 68%. I mean, I don't want to be.
You got to get rid of that Google, this Google map. They're hedging, so they're giving you the bullshit numbers right now.
Yeah, but
what they're doing is they're putting all of the mail-in ballots first. They're putting all of the major Democratic strongholds.
Yeah, but here's the point:
who cares?
Because the voting stopped. They can't influence the vote anymore.
Some counties come in before others. The big cities are going to have much better, machines.
I wouldn't worry about Google manipulating a map halfway through when the votes are being counted. It's not like they can influence anything. So it doesn't matter. But the map's turning more and more red.
Yeah.
No, the big difference was when Fox gave Pennsylvania to Trump at like 2:15 in the morning, and NBC still hadn't given Pennsylvania to him like 10 o'clock in the next day. That's where the manipulation comes from.
I mean, if Trump lost Texas and Florida, then it'd be game over. But he's not going to lose either. I don't think. Well, certainly not Florida. But I don't think he'll lose Texas.
Are there any House races that you guys have an interest in? The ones I'm looking for is the Kim Klacek in Baltimore.
Baltimore, yes.
I want to see the guy who's looking to take out Maxine Waters in Compton. And the other one is Anna Paulina Luna taking out Charlie Crist in Florida.
Okay, first of all, Anna Paulina Luna is smoking hot. I just want to say
she's former Army or Marine, so she'll take you out.
Yeah.
Those are the three I'm looking for.
Let me go to the live results for house races. I was trying to tell Gus, look, I found the girl of your dreams. Go for it. Where is Gus? Is he passed out drunk somewhere?
I was going to say, I have visions of Elvis shooting his TV in the form of Gus.
I'm sending him a text right now.
It tells me a lot of the voters in Colorado, they've been smoking too much of their weed, because the only time I ever saw Governor Hickenlooper, not just on the presidential candidate stage, where
Trump's closing out Virginia, man.
But Hickenlooper was on that Bravo show, Top Chef, and man, really? he is the dumbest box of rocks I've seen in a long time.
He's stupid, man. He's real dumb. Hickenlooper's an idiot.
Colorado has such potential and such opportunity, and I feel about them the way I do about relatives in Arizona who, for years, I first started hearing that in the 90s, where friends of mine in California were saying, God, things are getting so hard over here in California, and friends of mine in Arizona were like, yeah, we got Californians coming over here, and some of them, for some strange reason, they call themselves conservatives or Republicans, and they're nothing even remotely close to that. And I so frequently want to go to all these Californians who've moved to Colorado or Arizona and say, you already screwed up one U.S. state. Why are you trying? Are you European socialists? You feel if you just try this long enough, it's going to work?
Yeah, we believe in fraternity, equality.
The thing about Arizona is, up until 5 years ago, just 5 years ago, there were more immigrant or people coming into the state from other places, Chicago,
right,
Iowa, and whatever, than there were native Arizonans. That finally flipped in 5 years, just 5 years ago.
Arizona in the late 80s or early 90s. I mean, I knew political science professors at the University of Michigan who were joking, but were somewhat serious when they said that even as in recent in political terms, in the late 80s, early 90s, where they said there were still people in Arizona that wanted to secede. Like people in South Carolina are looking at people in Arizona saying, you all need to really take it easy over there. It just be such a massive change.
In Chicago, we call it Wrigley West.
There he is.
We a lot of us make our way to Arizona because we can't afford California in many instances. So but I don't think I don't know. I didn't overhear before what you guys were saying before, but the Arizona conversion in going purple, my estimation would be that it's not Midwesterners, but it's Tijuana welfare queens. Let's just call it what it is. So when there's a reason they're pumping them in, and when they either come in Catholic or they come in as single mothers with 4 kids. So it's pick your poison. But that's what I get it from Arizona. But
Gus, it's an honor, man.
Likewise.
It's an honor. So are you going with Mr. Incredible or just you are incredible?
No, incredible is just the level of fucking. I've been texting. I have 30 different text message threads going right now, and it's all
pay real money to be sitting in your office.
No, dude, think about. Listen, all of you guys, think about the level of lies on the polls they've fed the American public the last 2 months.
Yes,
you are down 20 points. You cannot this was Hillary Clinton. This was on steroids.
Yep.
The whole thing is a fraud, and we shouldn't have been surprised. We shouldn't have been surprised at all, because what they've taught us the last 3 years, and especially in 2020 with the enslavement of the lockdowns and all the rest of it, is these fucking cocksuckers are capable of anything. So you see a picture of Nate Silver, like the ultimate beta cuck liberal, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on. The data." Like,
he stopped, and after Florida was clinching away, he's like, "I'm gonna go take my dog for a walk,
for a jog." Maybe like, dude, the level, serious boys, like they were just telling us this guy was up 15 points, like last week. Like, think about it. We are living, and me and CJ and V last week, I was telling these guys, I'm like, dude, we're living in two realities, man. Like they are just pathological. Like, this isn't even weapons of mass destruction shit. They are just, dude, they lie every other fucking sentence that comes out of their mouth. Like, you can't, nothing they say is serious. It's all fraud. Everything's a lie. Everything, like, sorry, go.
Trump is he's in the process of flipping Virginia blue, 53.51 to Biden's 44.81, and that is with 60% of the votes already in.
I saw that,
and it's exploding. It's
exploding.
exploding.
Called Virginia for Biden. That's how bad it is.
Yep.
You meant red, V.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I meant red. I'm flipping red. Right. Sorry, exploding red.
Well, I still think Trump's going to take Maine.
Yeah,
that's a possibility. Yeah.
You know,
there's
what,
another
man?
Tyrannical governor up there.
Guys, I've been drinking for hours, obviously, but tell me.
We expect no less.
Tell me if this is crazy. I think so. No. Hear me out. And I know this is irrelevant. This is kind of a liberal argument, but the amount of pissed off people in California and New York and Illinois, he might win I think he's going to win the popular vote.
I am so glad you just said that. I am so glad, because I was just about to jump in with that. I was like, hey, has anybody looked at the popular vote? Yes, you're absolutely right.
My buddies, California gets up, and
my buddies who were apathetic in those because dude, I'm from Chicago and I have a shitload of buddies in California and V's from New York, but my buddies who are in all those places are like, fuck, we have to start paying attention to our local elections. We're locked down. We're slave. Like, even it's more of even if they're like, all right, maybe we won't flip the mayor of fucking shit. Maybe we won't get this dyke out of here in Chicago, but like, it's time to make a fucking statement. Like, everyone is like, my buddies in California are voting and they're Republicans. Like, and that, I think when they say, oh, Hillary won the popular vote, it's like, she won because all Republicans in Illinois, California, and New York stay home usually. Like, that's why she won the fucking popular vote, because it wouldn't shock me at all if he pulled out a popular vote, and I mean by like a million or so. Like, not at all. It would shock me. And you're right, V. The Virginia numbers look incredible. It's fucking hilarious.
I love it. I like to see Ralph Northam implode, that little bastard.
Oh fuck, the Klan member.
Yeah, the Klan member, Mr. Blackface himself.
Blackface. Oh, good stuff. Yeah.
First, what we like to do, Gus, we like to take the child out from the mother first, and we like to console and comfort the child while we decide what to do with it in another room with the doctor.
So I'm assuming we're all pretty fucking dialed in. We're all dialed into like politically we're dialed in. We pay attention to this shit. You know what's fucking funny? The last 4 hours, as I'm fucking following numerous Twitter feeds and YouTube feeds and social media feeds of people we follow who could we're like, Florida's I knew 6 hours ago Florida was over. And all of my friends who watch even Fox News, Fox News tried calling Virginia 4 or 5 hours ago.
Yes, they did.
The mainstream, the media is so fucking proper. It's bad, man. It's real bad. And I mean, it's good that people are awake to it. Again, dude, this is going better than expected. Like, when CNN's almost drinking tequila on TV right now. I'm Wolf Blitzer was so excited 5 hours ago. And
easy guess, I'm drinking tequila.
Me too. Guess. No, I went from Blanco, Julio, to fucking the good shit a couple hours ago. It's dude, it looks incredible. It looks like it's going to be nasty. If he goes Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and maybe even Nevada. I live here. I've been following the local feeds all day. I think Nevada at this point is a coin flip. And if he goes 3 or 4, they can't even fight it in court at that point. Like
Right.
if it was 1 or 2 states, they could fight it in court. But if he goes 4 or 5 states, dude, he's going to win Florida by fucking 4%, 3%.
Dude, Michigan is a lock, 54.42% to Biden's 43.69. That's real stats with about 40% of the votes already in. Wisconsin, okay, Kenosha, he was there. He was campaigning hard. He gave it his all. He's up, 3 points, which is 50.79 to 47.74, and that is with about 40% of the votes also are already counted, and it's raging. It's raging red. And yeah, I think it was Ken. I think you said it was right. It was Ken or Veles. One of you guys said that he's going to flip Maine. I think that's happening as well.
I think Veles said that. Yep.
Yeah, Veles, you're right, man. He's looks like
Well, and Gus,
Maine looks pretty strong.
Gus, you're joining us. You're joining us in progress, of course. Well, we were sitting here having the show before you joined, and I'm not going to, in the spirit of transparency, I'm sitting here with a bottle of Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Rye on my desk. No more running to the kitchen to fill up the glass.
Dude,
The only
way my dick would have been harder. Like I'm sitting here polishing my assault rifle with Jack Daniels in my drink. Like that great lead in, brother.
That's upstairs.
Perfection.
I got that upstairs, and my daughter asked me to go to the gun range on Sunday.
Perfection.
No, I was envisioning like how much fuego was going to come through the speakers when you joined the show. Number one, but number two, we were discussing, depending on which of the various websites we're all monitoring, the much stronger performance by Biden. Is that indicative more of a vote against Trump than it's a vote for Biden? But the other thing too is this enough of a win we can stay out of the courts?
That's brother. I've thought that for a long time, that they don't even hide that. Like they've wanted the courts are their angles all along. And me and CJ and V are like, we often bust balls. Like even if you look at like the modern Democratic Party, it doesn't even matter if it's the politicians. But talk about everyone says the deep state. You look at like all these lesbo fucking FBI agents now. They're all like fucking lawyers. Like they're not ex-Navy SEALs. Like they're all fucking lawyers. So you had to guess that litigation was part of their game. But per your point, and I agree 1,000%, is you could pull litigation off if it's a state, maybe 2. But when you start talking about 3 or 4, like a runaway, it's like, bitch, now it's game time. And dude, I don't even like getting happy and excited and optimistic because I feel like it curses me like mush. Like I don't want to jinx us.
Yeah.
But all this shit we've heard the last 3-4 years about people getting prosecuted and all of it, if it's gonna happen, dude, what has the FBI showed us the last 6 months? From the Bubba Wallace fucking garage door opener to the guys in I
don't care what you say. It's a noose. I don't know why the noose is there.
Dude, how about guys? How about the guys in Texas who almost got run off the road 2 days ago by a liberal, and the FBI is like, we're investigating the situation. Yeah. Investigating what? Like it's all on you. You could just watch the video for 20 seconds. Like, dude, the FBI is literally might be a domestic terrorist organization. Like it's that bad.
That's what I said. Bureaucracy's got to get whacked. It's got to get purged. There needs to be a purge in DC.
We will get back to that in a second. V, I'm gonna grab the mic from you here. It appears that Tommy Tuberville in Alabama has taken a Democratic seat away from Doug Jones.
Yes. You knew that was happening. You knew that.
Well, but that equalizes the loss in Colorado. Not that we can afford to lose anybody.
Yeah, McSally and Kelly. That's going to be an interesting one because Martha McSally is sort of mundane. She's not charismatic, and Mark Kelly is about as corrupt as Biden is.
She's got to hope to ride the coattails.
Yeah.
So I've been spending a lot of time in like northern Arizona, and they're obviously very pro McSally. But per your point, she's just not charming at all. Like she's not a politician.
You know what the dark horse in Arizona is? The dark horse in Arizona is there's a huge swath of young voters who are independent voters. They're educated. They haven't really voted in other elections before. They don't really care, but now they're starting to care, and they're actually They're actually resonating. Trump actually resonates with them. That's the sign that some data analysts are starting to pick up, and they're getting that metadata coming off of this group, and that could be the difference maker. McSally's boring. She can't. She's about as exciting to watch as paint drying. I mean, she has no enthusiasm. She has the personality of a microwave, whatever, right? But it's Trump. If they can get on the Trump train in Arizona, it will be a lock for Trump.
Brother V, you know what I think we didn't talk about as much about after the second debate, and I don't know if you guys noticed this or not or agree with it at all, but I think we didn't talk about the fact or didn't acknowledge that what a big deal it was that basically the election really might be about the lockdowns. Like, who's the lockdown candidate and who isn't? And why I'm bringing that up is because you just brought up, dude, are young people really pro-lockdown? Of course they're not.
Yeah.
Like, so when you look at all these, I make fun of millennials for a living, but when you look at these kids, who are 20 to 30 years old, do they really want some fucking pussy governor, commie piece of shit, telling them they can't go grab a drink? I mean, seriously.
Exactly.
It was a very undertone moment in the debate that basically Trump made it clear, like, you want to keep the country locked down forever. And most people want to we have to get back to normal here. And I think if you're a young person, if you're a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 20-year-old, when you're looking at that, you're like, fuck, that's a good. And again, if you're in one of these states, you're like, fuck that bullshit. I don't want to, I think the lockdown thing is very underreported, especially with what we're seeing now in Europe, like Spain, France, all of it. England, fuck, dude, Jesus Christ. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the feds being against us like that? Where by Kamala, however the fuck you pronounce that dyke's name, is like, hey, you can't fucking go out. I decided, like, bitch, fuck, bring a SWAT team, cunt. I'm going to grab a beer. Like, but that's where they go, and that's when in this country, that's getting ugly in Germany. Can you imagine how ugly it would get here?
Oh, forget about it.
Yeah, if they're like, we're letting you out on St. Patrick's Day finally. It's like, oh yeah, good luck with that. Yeah.
Paul, you're in the UK. How's the people in the UK taking this lockdown nonsense as we sidestep here?
Well, I mean, first off, it's a lockdown, but it's not as draconian as it sounds. But yes, they're proposing to put the country back into lockdown, and undoubtedly they'll vote it through because the opposition will make sure it gets railroaded through. The issue is half of the government doesn't want the lockdown because they know the economic damage. The business doesn't want a lockdown because it knows the economic damage. The government's line on why they've reached this decision is falling apart, and it'll only last for so long. But most people just go, well, I mean, yeah, there's a small vocal minority who are like against it, but a lot of people are just like, well, it is what it is. But the problem is, what they're not realizing, a lot of people, is that the economy craters, and when their job's gone, it's not going to suddenly reappear. And yeah, the government can keep furloughing people, and to be fair, the government is panicking by trying to bail everything out and pay everyone because they're desperately concerned that the masses are going to go revolt against what's happening. But the masses don't realize the economic carnage that's going to ensue. And also, of course, the flip side to it is increasingly there's backlash inside the health sector because they're going, well, there's people who need urgent treatment for cancer, whatever, who aren't getting treatment. And also it's the psychological damage that you can't keep people locked up. But the problem is they didn't do things right. They failed to get the policy right from day one. So they'll inevitably resort to doing this. And then in a few weeks, they'll unlock everything. Everything starts to return to normal as it does in the summer. And then they're going to go, oh, what do we do again? Oh, the numbers are increasing. And they'll just go through this cycle. and until there's nothing left in the country because the entire economy is wrecked, and there's a kind of an inevitability that this is going to happen, and most people just don't see the reality of what's coming. So at the moment they're going, well, I'm not happy about it, but I'm still getting paid 80% of my salary, therefore I'm okay. But once they lose their jobs, once they can't pay their rent, their mortgage, etc., then there is going to be major problems in this country, and that's an inevitability.
Hey, you guys, real quick. I just found out Biden lost Scranton.
They used to call me Scranton Joe, and I got hairy legs, and the kids just jump in the pool and pull my pants down.
Hey, Ken, Scranton is where Biden grew up. It kind of reminds me of Al Gore not winning Tennessee.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hey, Jim Willie, what's up, buddy?
Woo!
Jim,
Yeah,
we have
Jackass.
Jackass in the house. Welcome, Jim.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Hi, Ken. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Hi,
Do you know what, for a
Carlos.
second, it didn't sound like you, Jim.
When? Right now?
When you first came, no, for the first 2 seconds when you came in.
Oh,
Anyway.
I didn't say anything. Hey, I'm watching. I'm watching several states. It's Texas, Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, and Michigan. These states are all up for grabs, and I'm noticing that the early mail-in votes are tremendously in favor of Biden, and therefore I suspect the Langley hand with falsified, fraudulent, deeply corrupted voting process. So it seems like if Trump is going to win those states, their selected battleground states, he must win by 10% to overcome the Langley effect. It's astonishing, the early mail-in vote lead for Biden in every single battleground state, which makes no sense. I have a feeling that he's going to win all 5 of those states that I just cited: Texas, Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, and Michigan. I'm quite familiar with Ohio. I'm quite familiar with North Carolina because my brother went to law school, and I went to the beach. I went to the beach at Outer Banks every year, sometimes twice. So I learned a lot about the state, especially their basketball. I lived in Florida for a year, and I studied a lot there. I don't mean school. I mean just picking up on what's going on. So if you don't, in Florida, have a tremendous early lead, you lose. So I think what we have is this extension for the counting of the absentees and mail-ins, and it is their open door for Langley fraud. They've got a 3-day extension in Pennsylvania, for instance, and Philadelphia is well known for being filthy corrupt. I got to tell you a quick story. 2004, my buddy Tim volunteered to be a vote center monitor in Philadelphia, and it was near Drexel University, inner city. And he went there 1 hour before the voting center opened, and he and 3 others noticed that every single one of the voting machines had 500 votes at the 0 point. I mean, at the 0 time level, 500 votes for Baby Bush. Every single machine had 500 votes, so they set them back to 0. But, you know, that's the kind of corruption that goes on. It's all over the place. I don't know that they have as much corruption in the voting machine software this year, but I think the corruption is in the mail-in ballots that start the game. And every one of these battleground states, Carlos, is seeing an enormous, not enormous, but a very sizable Biden head start. And which means to me, Trump's got to win by 10% in order to win. It's just filthy corrupt. And I don't know what is going to be fixed ever with this unless Langley's shut down. The only way you do that is in their narcotics trafficking, and that we don't want to get into that discussion. I've got some information as we proceed about the estimation and the methods that they use, because being a statistician, I know a good deal about their methods. And this is not political poll, yes, no, do you like Biden or Trump? It's not like that at all. It's far more complicated. It's essentially stratified random sampling on differences from the previous election. It's pretty accurate what they do. But notice the bias, even today, even at this late stage, we're over 90% in Florida for the precincts registering their votes. Trump has a 3% plus lead, and they won't call it a victory. Why is that? Because they're biased in the media, and also because they're leaving that door open for the corruption with the vote counting on the mail-ins. The mail-ins is the red herring and the wild card. I tell you, this is fascinating stuff. I got to tell you, I was pretty nervous 2 hours ago when Texas wasn't looking good, North Carolina wasn't looking good, Ohio wasn't looking good, and I'm always worried about the fraud of Michigan, where that asshole Whitmer is the governor and can do whatever. I don't know what. Gosh, I tell you, Michigan has turned into a really messy state. Anyway, that's my little speech. I gotta ask you, Carlos, why are you all dressed up? What's going on?
I decided to shower today, Jim, so I got No, I'm actually at the Indiana Libertarian Donald Rainwater for Indiana campaign headquarters tonight. It's their celebration, and I felt the need to get dressed up just so that I'd be appropriate. And then obviously here, Jim, thank you for joining tonight. It looks like, appearing to the data, it looks like Florida has been declared Trump. Boom. It's red now. Ohio is red now, with the majority of precincts reporting it to 83%. Trump is polling at 52.4%, Biden at 46.2%. So it's really looking like Trump is really going to seal this away tonight without any margin of error.
I don't know. I don't know about that. We got a lot of Western states. Some of them can go to Biden. Arizona, I don't think will go to Biden, but New Mexico might. Oregon, Biden. Washington State, Biden. I don't think Idaho will go blue. I don't think Montana will go blue. I don't think Wyoming will go blue. But I tell you, I was pretty damn nervous 2 hours ago, and I didn't upchuck. I'm not that nervous, but man, oh man, I tell you, Texas worries me. But then Karl Rove got on. It was really kind of funny watching Karl Rove, because he's a baby Bush animal. He was the mind behind the Bush campaign, Bush 2 campaign. Rove is a Texan, and he gave his excellent analysis of what's going on. And he said, Texas is a lock. It's going to be a 3% victory for Trump. And now it just turned more and more and more. I'm very, very bothered by this initial head start given to Biden in almost every battleground state. It bothers the hell out of me. Pennsylvania is my state. I know it very well. Philadelphia is filthy. And Philadelphia's got something like, 60% of all of the, oh gosh, I don't want to misstate. It's extraordinarily Democrat. Philadelphia is also dirty as hell. They've got a long history of being dirty. They're kind of like Chicago. Chicago is to the Midwest what Philadelphia is to the East Coast, except New York. New York, my gosh, what a puke of a state New York is.
Hey, it's a beautiful state, Jim. What are you talking about? I love it out here. It's great. The high taxes, the excrement that's on the sidewalks.
Who's
the homeless
talking?
It's V.
Oh, V. Okay.
Yeah, the homeless encampments in Central Park. There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, hold on. Breaking news.
Oh, what happened?
AOC has been reelected.
Oh, God. There's something about that little stooge. There really is. Jim made some interesting points here, Jim. You were talking about Langley. You were talking about some of the mail-in vote fraud. It's pretty interesting to see this. One of the things that we kind of were privy to coming into the couple of weeks before this whole entire election thing started was a project called Project Hammer and a software system called Scorecard. Did you guys ever hear of Hammer and Scorecard?
I heard of Project Hammer, but I'm not sure what it is.
Okay. Hammer was originally developed. It was a powerful computer system. I forgot the name of the MIT scientists who developed it. It was designed for the NSA. It is designed for data analytics, data mining, and for hacking abilities. And what happened was when when Barry Soetoro left office in 2012, his deep state curmudgeons, I'm talking about John Brennan, the Clapper crew, they happened to take that system out of the government hands, which is, again, a very treasonous thing to do, and they turned it loose. And what they've been doing with Hammer and Scorecard is the last, several years, key election races that were pretty close have all of a sudden flipped blue. And people were wondering, how did that happen? How did that loss occur? So they were gearing Hammer and Scorecard to work in conjunction with the mail-in voting. That's why when we saw Florida open up, you look at all these states with oh my God, this massive Biden lead. That is Biden blowing his load early. That is the vote. The mail-in voting has already been padded. The missing ingredient here, something that happened tonight that was nullified from a few guys that I talked to that were nullified about 3 weeks ago, is Scorecard and Hammer. And so the question is, the leads that have been locked in, will they stay locked in? And I think they will. The problem is the media and the Democrat apparatchiks that are going to work feverishly trying to contest an already locked in election. And that's going to be the problem. It's going to be the social unrest. But I think the game's over.
I just don't know about this social unrest. I hear about it all the time. If we were going to have social unrest and violence and more looting and rioting by burn, loot, and murder, Black Lives Matter, then we would have seen much more BLM activity in the last 4 months. I remember back in April, May, as we turned, there was a lot of reports that leaders for the organization and funding agents for the organization for BLM were arrested and incarcerated and subdued and drained of their funds. And the end result was we saw no more cities burn. So I'm wondering, if there's going to be unrest, where the hell is it going to come from? I just can't see it. So I think we're going to have a big letdown for the expected violence, which will bring a smile to my face and a fart out my ass for these Democrats who don't even know that their party has been totally infiltrated and commandeered by the globalist cabal of New World Order fascist shitheads. I am so angry at what's going on in my country. And people have asked me, are you voting? No, I did not do an absentee vote. I'm just not going to get involved. I'm going to watch. I'm going to be a very interested observer. And if anyone would like me to make an explanation of how they do these voting projections on the victory, I can give some information, but I'll hold off on volunteering that. I want to see Texas turn. I want to see North Carolina turn. I mean, being called by these corrupt news agencies. I'm watching Fox News all evening long, and I think they're the least biased, but they are biased. And I'm noticing a lot of very balanced commentary. You should hear Tucker Carlson. He's making numerous apologies for the media and their wrong polls. It's amazing. They didn't cut him off. They didn't cut him off.
Yeah, so quick update on Texas specifically, Jim, since you asked. It looks like Trump has pulled a solid lead ahead, 51.2% of the vote versus Biden at 47.5%. Let me see the statistics.
What's a percentage? What's a percentage of tallies on that?
It looks like we're at for 71% reporting.
71. Okay.
Yep.
That's excellent. So it's only going to get worse for Biden in Texas. Okay,
Correct.
So
Correct.
I put a little check on Texas. We still got Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Had North Carolina been called yet?
Let's see here. So on North Carolina, it looks like it's turning red as well. It looks like marginal lead there.
1 point.
Yeah,
It's
What's
about
the percent?
49%.
Roll up
Trump.
a little bit. Is it over 90?
yeah,
92. Good.
92.
Okay, this is only going to get worse for Biden. You know, here's an interesting state. They had a debate on Fox News about Virginia because they called Virginia very early. I mean, they called it an hour and a half ago. And then they got some analyst type, like a quant jockey like me. And he started to explain that Biden had it in the bag. And they were talking about comparison of interviews versus actual votes. And I say, screw that. That doesn't sound like science to me. I'd really like to try to explain, Carlos, if you can give me maybe 3 minutes. I'd like to explain how they do calling of a state.
Go ahead, because they called it. And if you look at the most recent data that's reporting, Trump is pulling ahead in Virginia, 52.4%.
I want them to get Virginia very wrong because I want them to be embarrassed to high heaven for their corruption. I think they tried to make a few states blue very early in order to try to affect some actual votes before the polls were closed in the West. And that's the method they use, in addition to loading up the front end. But let me explain this. Let's suppose you've got 20 different counties in a state, and you have a good record of what happened in 4 years ago. You know, each state's margin of victory, each county's margin of victory for one way or the other in 2016. Then you see the votes coming in for this year. So what you do is you make an estimate of the difference between now versus the county 4 years ago. And if, let's just say, Trump carried the state 4 years ago and had a decent margin, well, then you get a pretty good idea after the votes come in if the differences are not much. So it might be early and it might be kind of intermediary, but what you're doing is you're saying, give me the estimates on the difference between this year and 4 years ago for each of the 20 counties in the state. Now, roll them up and use your multipliers for your weights that add up to 1. And then you come up with something like, minus 0.3. Well, minus 0.3 for what? It's minus 0.3 versus the result of last election. And that's how they project. And then they get their margin of error. So the difference has a very small standard error compared to a raw vote. It's like, a benchmark. It's like saying, well, I'm growing, but you can project my height based on my brother's height. And he's 8 years older, so he's already grown. And now I'm growing, and at my age 15, I'm an inch taller than my brother. So you make a projection of where your brother ended up, and now what's your difference? You're projecting the difference, and the difference is much lower standard error. In other words, much higher accuracy. And it's really quite interesting, but I'll tell you, the fly in the ointment on that method is like in a state such as Virginia. Virginia has a lot of worthless immigrants coming in who don't speak English, who don't assimilate, who don't have any skills, and they're part of the free shit army, and they're voting Democrat. So it messes up that differential calculus that I just described. Now, you could probably say, well, we can factor that in. We can make a whole new layer. That's what they try to do. Put in an added layer for not only the difference between this year and 4 years ago, but the difference on that little factor. And then they have to know how that little factor, like the worthless immigrants, how do they vote? Well, I'll tell you how they vote. It's like 95% Democrat because they're bribed. They're brought into the country on condition that they vote Democrat. Okay, so it's really quite interesting, that whole method. And it's called stratified sampling because you've got the 20 different counties, and it's stratified off a differential. So it's got two different, really strong statistical characteristics. Okay, I think that covers it.
Good. Anyone else want to jump in there? Go for it.
Is Gus still around?
Gus passed out, or he's logged out on that.
Go ahead, fellas. Gentlemen, I got to jump off.
Gus is going to go mobile to the Vegas Strip, hopefully.
The live feed.
You gentlemen have a great night. Trump 2020. Cheers.
We've lost V.
Well, he just signed out. He said goodbye just then.
Okay.
I got to tell you something kind of funny. One of my high school buddies is a former Iowa governor. He was in my brother's class, but I knew him not well. And his name was Tom Vilsack. And he was a good guy, an honest guy, but he went Democrat and he relied on Hillary Clinton to get him the governor post in Iowa. And I really wonder if my brother's ex-buddy, who I knew, went to the dark side in order to maintain his political career. I don't know what he's doing right now, but Iowa is up for grabs. Iowa will kind of be an indicator of what's going on in the upper Midwest. I saw a lead in Wisconsin for Trump that surprised me because that is a traditional liberal state, Wisconsin. Oh, look at that. He's got a 3.5 point lead. What's the percent? Roll up a little bit, probably about 40 or what's the percent? 51. Okay, good. When I was in college, the most violent anti-Vietnam demonstrations by the students was in Wisconsin. Madison, Wisconsin is the home of University of Wisconsin. It's also the home of Russell, what's his name? The quarterback for Seattle, Russell Wilson. Michigan and Wisconsin were the most violent. And there's a correlation. The violent anti-war protesters are typically liberal and Democrat voters. So if Trump wins Michigan and Wisconsin, I think it's game over because my list of 6, except for Pennsylvania, which is going to be up for grabs. I got some comments to make about Pennsylvania in a minute.
Well, typically, like as they stated, like Florida was very key because it makes the path very difficult for either candidate without Florida. So many of the people that were reporting were saying that Florida will probably dictate the path of the election, but I agree with you, Jim, in regards to Michigan and Wisconsin. Obviously, Michigan where it's going, but still quite a bit of votes still come in Wisconsin.
Yeah, there's room to go, but notice the trend. It's true in just about every state. The early vote is for Biden, and it's the corrupt mail-in. I am absolutely convinced that maybe as many as 30 million votes were given to Biden corruptly, Carlos. 105 million mail-in votes. Are you kidding me? It's a perfect opportunity for Langley to load up Biden. Why did Biden have such a lead in every single state from the beginning? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, it sort of does, Jim, because they said that because of the COVID, mail-in voting went from about 42% in 2016 to 67% this time.
That's not my point, Ken. That's not my point. I know that there are more mail-in votes. That's not my issue, the volume. Not my issue. Why are they all heavily 80% Biden?
Well, like I said, because the Democrats who are living in these lockdown places, they're not going out and doing voting. From what I saw earlier, Republicans are like 82% to 18% standing in line and voting in person. The majority of Democrats these days are voting mail-in.
Okay, I heard one of the survey polls that there are a lot of different questions in presidential elections, and I get off on it because it's quite fascinating. You can see a lot of hidden factors at work. They said that when people were voting with their primary factor being the economy, it was overwhelming Trump. When they're voting for their and the primary factor is the COVID policy, etc., they're voting for Biden. So someone who's afraid to go outside and relies upon a mail-in, or someone who doesn't want to wait in line because they might get contaminated by the person standing in front of them, which is absolute moron stupidity, they would tend to vote for Biden. So I get that. Okay, that's a pretty good explanation. But, the numbers are just way too big for Biden early, way too big. When I saw it, a lump in my throat occurred about 3 hours ago. I thought, oh, shit, Langley loaded up the mail-in votes for the Head Start, and Trump's got to win by 10%. I got a comment about Pennsylvania. A lot of people don't know this about Pennsylvania. It's going to sound a little wacky, but I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to put it out there, and I'm not going to say that I'm 100% confident about this, but there are a number of people whose opinion I respect, and Pennsylvania has seceded from the Union. That's what I'm trying to say. Pennsylvania has found a legal way to use their state entity and secede from the U.S. corporation that is beholden to the Vatican. Pennsylvania is the only one. Now, notice that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania gave the 3-day extension, and the U.S. Supreme Court cannot overrule that. This is really quite fascinating. We might see the legal challenge for the settling of this election to be over Pennsylvania and its outcome. And it might reach the Supreme Court, and that might not even settle it. This is where it might go. I tell you, it could be fascinating. I'm in awe of this story and this factor, but the U.S. corporation is very real, beholden to the Vatican. They have the rights for all IRS income. And I can tell you for a fact that I owed the IRS something, not a big sum of money. It was over the dispensation of a pension 3 years ago. I owed the IRS some money, and they had been taking out $250, $270 a month. And in February, it stopped. It stopped. And to me, it was evidence that the IRS might not have sharp teeth anymore. Or it could be the same time Trump cut off the Vatican. I tell you, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and Pennsylvania is part of that. And it's my home state. I come from Pittsburgh, Dan Marino's high school, college in Ohio, grad school back in Pittsburgh with Carnegie Mellon, and then off to Boston for 20 years. But I know my state. It does not have very many blue counties, Carlos. It really doesn't. And most of them are around Philadelphia.
Absolutely. Jim, great commentary. Let's go around the horn real quick and see if Veles, Ken, Paul, if you guys keep an eye on any other states or any other contests right now that are interesting you guys.
Yeah, this is Veles. Donna Shalala lost her congressional seat in Florida, which is interesting.
Sweet.
The other thing, too, is, as we all know, the media being an entertainment mechanism rather than an informing mechanism. It's funny, whether I'm checking Bloomberg or even Fox or other networks, they all keep showing Donald at a deficit, which makes me wonder if this isn't a function of necessarily trying to beguile the public, but just they need to make this football game look like there's more to it than there is.
Well, notice they don't even have Florida red right now.
Depending on which service you're looking at, right?
Yeah,
it's still yet to be declared.
Yeah, I know, because they got more corrupt mail-in ballots that they might ship in another 20, 30, 40,000 of them later this evening. Yeah, I get that.
Good, Veles. Anything else?
I'd like to remind people that 9 months after the inauguration of Trump in January of 2017, the National Security Agency publicized in a small way their revised Trump versus Hillary results, and they declared that Trump won by 12 million votes.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay,
They did that a couple of months after the election was over.
I thought it was about September. So you're saying that it was more like about inauguration time? They wouldn't do it was it right
about 6 to 8 months after the election was over. If you went to the University of Michigan's data, but again, you got to be a weird person like me checking actual university data to cross check what the public is being told. But yeah, he did win the popular vote.
Okay. Oh well, no, I knew he won the popular vote. I'm saying he won by 12 freaking million.
Right.
Yeah, Jim, on the night, supposedly he lost by 3 million in the media, but he won by 12. The one thing I'm looking at in Arizona is an interesting race. Obviously, I know some of the local politics here, but there's Debbie Lesko. She's the primary representative for Peoria, about where my mom lives, and not quite surprised, but yeah, it does encompass my district too. There was a doctor, Dr. Tipperini or something like that. She tried 2 elections over 4 years to beat Lesko, and she got swamped every time. Well, what she decided to do is, I'm going to move over to Scottsdale, and I'm going to try against Larry Schweikert. So she's carpetbagging from county to county and district to district just to try to get elected.
How much time do they have to develop roots before they can actually run from that congressional district? Do they need to have residence for 6 months or 1 year or what?
You don't have to have residence in the city of any type of thing. I mean, you could have it for like a month, be living there, and then run for it. I mean, the big difference between resident of the state versus moving from city to city.
Yeah, I get that, but moving from city to city, you need to have some kind of residence if you're going to run as a rep from that district. Hey, Ken, is Trump going to carry Arizona? How is that looking?
Well, pretty
It's
much.
early.
Yeah. All the there was a lot of mail-in ballots,
Arizona.
but I'm pretty sure he's going to go ahead and win that.
Yeah. Okay. What's the percent? It's
73%.
Well, it depends on the county.
Exactly.
Yavapai and Navajo are at 0%, even though they show votes being in. Maricopa obviously is the biggest one, and that's, depending how you look at it, it's within 100,000. But we need a little bit more time to let that straighten itself out.
But look at the percent, 73 reporting. So you're saying that all the rest are heavily red? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
it's
I
not
don't
so
know.
much. Yeah, no, I'm looking at it at a county. I'm looking at a readout that's by county, and there's a number of counties that haven't reported yet. Yes, Maricopa County is the biggest kid in that dogfight, but Maricopa County is right now showing 0% reporting. They've got 798,000 for Biden, 656 for Trump. So and I don't know when Arizona's polls closed. So we got to give that a little time yet.
I think they closed about 2 hours ago.
Okay.
Oh wow! That's 270.
Hey, Maine, as I said, is trending.
Maine, I can't imagine Maine going for Biden. I got to tell you something about Maine. I got a client who comes from Lewiston, Maine, and he said, "Jim, you're not going to believe this, but there are 10,000 Somalis living in Lewiston, Maine.
That's stunning.
They're all given, free. What do you call it? Free rent, free food, free healthcare." What are they showing here? This is this the 2020 election in front of our face here?
Yeah, I think this is Newsmax.
They're projecting?
Yeah.
They're projecting, huh?
Yeah, they say that they've pretty much given Florida and a number of other states, but I think they're saying if he takes Pennsylvania and Arizona, then
it's over. Yeah. Well, that would be sweet. I tell you, that's not much of a margin of victory. And look at New Mexico. That's disappointing. New Mexico and Nevada, I'm a little bit surprised. They're saying Michigan would go blue. It didn't look that way a bit of time ago. And Virginia, they're still calling blue. I just want so bad to see Virginia go red to embarrass these so-called experts. I don't regard them as experts. I tell you, I saw 3 different segments by Tucker Carlson on Fox, and he's one of the reasons I turned on Fox, and I had to tolerate Chris Wallace, who I think is a freaking moron. Golly, he's stupid. His father was smart. How did he turn so stupid? But Tucker Carlson went on at length about how he said we have a lot of explaining to do in the media of how we got it so wrong 4 years ago and how we've learned nothing and we continue to get it wrong this year. It's like we don't know anybody who embraces Trump, and we don't want to talk to anybody who embraces Trump. And therefore, what he doesn't say is they're triple counting. They're not true. Triple bias, triple representation in the sampling for the Democrats. That's what they're doing. You need to divide the Biden count by 3, and it doesn't show up that. Well, I'm not joking around. They're triple sampling Democrats in the polls, and they're doing something else. My sister reminded me again yesterday. She wrote me an email and said, Jim, I want you to remember something that happened 2 months ago. I got a call from a pollster, and they asked if I was going to vote. I said, definitely yes. And they asked me who I was going to vote for, and I said Trump. And they said, just a minute. And they came back 20 seconds later and said, I'm sorry, this interview is invalid. So that's how they're keeping the polls high for Biden. They're double and triple representing the Democrats, and they're just interrupting the phone call when it looks like it's going to be a Trump vote. This is corruption in polling. And I hate to say this because it's bigger government, but I think these polling agencies need to qualify. And some of them need to be put out of the business. They're steering the public, and they're corrupt, and they're interfering with the democratic process. And to me, it's a form of sedition. It's press sedition.
I don't know if they had called it earlier, but it looks like Alabama has, for the Senate race, has been confirmed. They're reporting now that Tommy Tuberville will win the
Correct.
Senate. Will
Correct.
win for the Senate, which actually pushes, I believe, the Republican count up by just 1. So it's still going to be interesting. With Arizona and Georgia still need to report for the Senate race. So it's still close.
Yeah. Well, holy moly. Can you bring up Michigan again, Carlos? Because I'm having trouble swallowing the fact that they call that blue on the race. We got an 11-point lead, and what is the percent? Roll up a little bit for the percent counties.
42% was the last I saw.
42.
Yeah.
All right, that's pretty early. I wonder why they call that blue. Well, probably.
I'm going at pink.
Where you getting? It's pink.
With Wisconsin, it's pink.
Yeah, Wisconsin and Michigan both are now leaning towards Trump. Both states.
Well, I know that, but remember that electoral college tally, and it said if Pennsylvania and Arizona go for Trump, it's all over. They had Wisconsin. I think they had Wisconsin and Michigan both blue.
Oh, I gotcha.
I don't know if you can bring that tally up again.
And I think those were projections; they weren't actual. This is what it is. And Newsmax is going to report like Florida, Texas to go to the red. All the other mainstream media who are playing this stupid game. They want this thing to last a number of days.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be everybody glued to the set. Probably me a little bit too. I never watch the news, and I had to go search here in Costa Rica what channel is actually available. And they had CNN International, and they had Fox News, and really not much else. So I felt fortunate even to get Fox News.
Yep.
And I got to say this again. I'm finding that their reporting is quite balanced. They're bringing up embarrassing points about the polls being wrong. They're bringing up interesting points about Hillary and the corruption 4 years ago. I'm kind of impressed. Tucker Carlson is my main man tonight. House at this hour. Gosh, it's amazing that the House. I got to tell you a quick story. I know I have a client who said, Jim, I got to tell you a story about a friend of mine who ran for the U.S. Congress in Western Massachusetts. Now, I come from Boston. I spent 20 years there. Boston is the center of the liberal camp, and all surrounding areas along the coast are very liberal camp, but the West is not. I'm talking about the border of New York State, and on the south would be the border of Connecticut. This guy was ahead about 15 to 20% the entire election, and then on election night, the Democrat won. And he tried to challenge the vote and get access to the ballots, and he was blocked out. So he concluded, my client concluded that his friend had the entire election stolen by the Democrats. In a Democrat state with a Democrat governor, and he got absolutely nowhere in the challenge. So that's how the Democrats, I think, in the blue states are stealing seats in the congressional House.
Yep. Gentlemen, let's go around the horn real quick with closing comments. Obviously, it's going to be probably a long night before the rest of the election results roll in, but I want to give the opportunity for everyone to just closing comments as we wrap up this phenomenal live stream. We've been live streaming out for over 3 hours, which is a lot of fun. It's kind of like Joe Rogan style, which I kind of get, but we'll start at the Paul. We heard you for a while. Paul, closing comments, and then we'll go to Jim, Veles, and Ken. Go for it, Paul.
Well, I'm sure I'm allowed to speak. But anyway, jokes aside. Yeah, with regards to the popular vote, Trump's about 2.1 million in front currently.
Wow.
How many? 2 million?
2.1 million.
Wow.
Yes.
That's thus far. I think with regards to Biden, actually with regards to the polls, while everyone's foaming at the mouth about the fact they're lying about the polls, that's actually to Trump's advantage, because if Trump supporters think Trump's behind, they're going to go out and vote. If they actually projected Trump to be miles ahead, voters might get complacent and not vote for him. So actually it plays into Trump's hands and not against Trump. And I always think that I don't know why people get bent out of shape when they try to make out Biden's ahead. Because if they said Trump was 20 points ahead, maybe a lot of Trump supporters go, I don't need to vote. So it actually, ironically, works in the opposite way to most people's perspective. But with regards to, as much as Trump has huge popularity, there is definitely a protest vote against Trump. And that's why, and I think to underestimate and suggest that, the Biden's vote is not indicative of Biden getting these votes, I think underestimates the fact that there is people disgruntled with Trump for a whole bunch of reasons. Do I think he's going to win? Yeah, I'm still convinced he'll win. And it's far better that Trump wins rather than Biden. But then we come back to the age-old point, will win. But what's Trump actually going to do as a president in the next 4 years to resolve all the problems that the US faces going forward? That is the question. And okay, let's assume that the Republicans retain, the Senate. Then if they don't, then that's even a bigger problem, but it looks like they'll win. The House isn't really quite so much of an issue. But at the end of the day, it's all well and good Trump winning, but what is he actually going to do? Because frankly, in the first 4 years of his presidency, there's an awful lot of expectation and all these ideas he was going to do all sorts of things. Well, none of it's transpired. And again, come back to the point that all these various Department of Justice, et cetera, if you don't root out the corruption to the very bottom of it, then whatever Trump may want to do or not want to do, but let's just assume he wants to do things, it's never going to happen. So what is he effectively actually going to do in the next 4 years, given the US economy is cratering, the dollar's going to lose its world reserve currency status, US hegemony's gone? How is he going to manage that? And, arguably, here's the question. why did they put up such a ridiculously weak candidate in Joe Biden against Trump? Why would you do that? I mean, of all the people, I'm not saying there's many great candidates the Democrats could have chosen, but why did they put such a weak candidate in Joe Biden up against him? Were they really actually serious about wanting to win? Because truthfully, if you were sat there, would you want to win this election? No. Because if you know what's coming, why would you want to win it?
Oh, great point. Yeah,
I'll follow up if you want.
Go ahead. Go for it. Go for it, Jim.
Okay. I took some notes. There's some points to make. I have a different viewpoint. I got a different vantage point for sure. Yeah, it is true. There is a strong effect that if someone is ahead, that the opponents will rally to defend their lower position and try to close the gap. There is that. But there's also another effect, and that is, well, I don't want to vote for the loser. I want to vote for the winner. And if it looks like Biden's going to win, I'll change my vote to Biden because I want to brag to my friends that I voted for the winner because I'll look like an idiot if I don't vote for the winner. It's kind of it's a weaker point, Paul, but it is an effect. I don't think it's as big an effect as what you cite. Okay, as for Trump in the second term, I disagree strongly. You say, well, if he didn't get it done the first term, he won't in the second. That's essentially what you're saying, I believe. And
what I said is he hasn't achieved it in anything of any real note in the first term. So why is it going to be different in the second term?
Because he doesn't have to run for re-election.
But
it's a very big point.
But the point is what? Well, hang on. But what's he actually going to be able to achieve? Now, okay, so he doesn't have to worry about getting re-elected.
Yeah.
But the point is why are all the obstacles that he had wasn't just because he wanted to get re-elected for a second term. The obstacles are far greater than that, and none of them have disappeared.
They are. But to remove the obstacles would put at risk his re-election, and therefore he didn't do it. And I agree with you to some extent. He's got a lot of dirty players still in the room, but they're getting weeded out one by one. And in the second term, let's see who he appoints as the Attorney General. Let's see who he appoints as the FBI Director. Let's see who he appoints in the positions where things can get cleaned up. And as for that's the important issue. The repercussions are going to come, but he did not want repercussions to be in the climate for the re-election and campaign. And now he doesn't have to worry about that. He can basically say, screw you all. I'm the president. This is my second term. I'm going to do as I wish. I've been delaying on a number of things, and now I'm going to get them done. I want them to be done during my legacy.
Those are very key in terms of the Attorney General, in terms of the next FBI Director. Great points by both of you. Veles, go for it.
Thanks, CJ. 4 bullet points. The first, Paul, I agree with you completely. That candidate. That was comments I made last week on my show on Rogue, or let me rephrase, my appearance on Rogue. The next is as far as the election is concerned, in my opinion, we need 48 hours to see whether or not this turns into a legal battle. The riots, I'll give it 72 hours to see whether or not we have riots. A number of and I know most of you have seen this, a number of the different sites that have gone public about Zoom calls and similar by various supposed activists, they were talking about the 5th or the 6th to really start moving their things into action. So we'll see whether or not they do. And last but not least, and it's a theme we discussed several times tonight, have to know what the hell Donald's plan is over the next 90 days. There's people he needs to replace. There's initiatives he needs to launch. And we right now have no visibility on what that is.
Very good. Ken, go for it. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's a number of things going back. Trump attempted early on to make, partnerships with Russia, with Putin, with China, with North Korea. Obviously he had this stick up his butt regarding Iran. and then of course there was Syria. But the fact of the matter is that once the Russiagate BS got in there, he pretty much had his hands tied from day one. You know, in regards to what we've talked about, so many Republicans against Trump, the Lincoln Project. We saw the fact that they couldn't get Obamacare completely dismantled when the Republicans had the House and Senate for the first 2 years. A number of different things. I think by winning the second time, he's going to have a little bit more gravitas over the Republican Party because the people have spoken. The last thing to take a look at is if there's one thing Trump has done, he has changed the court system completely. Appellates, Supreme Court, boom. A lot of the stuff that were rejected in his first 2-3 years are not going to be rejected that he wants to push in his next 4. But Paul makes the absolute key point: unless the swamp gets seriously drained and real people who are going to do real things come into play, then it's going to be a moot point, because Russia and China, and once Europe decides to pick a side, they go their own way and create the new world, the new reset. Then Trump can be king over a place that is isolated from everybody else, and there's not really much that's going to happen.
I think, let me add something regarding this Biden as a weak candidate. I studied this issue, not that I'm a great political expert, but I studied this issue with Hillary. Why did they have Hillary? To begin with, Hillary had no qualifications even to be a New York senator. Hillary had no qualifications to be a Secretary of State. So why would they have Hillary? I think so many of the Democrat candidates are ridiculously dirty that they didn't want to run for all the scrutiny. But Hillary had a big enough ego that she didn't mind the scrutiny and figured if anyone got in her way, she would have them murdered. Now, when it comes to Biden, it's a different animal. I think the party has been decimated at the leadership level because it's being controlled by puppet strings by the globalist level. So the supranationals are in control of the Democrat Party. I mean, like Soros, Rothschild, Rockefeller, they're calling all the shots. And what they prefer is malleable, controllable people to be the presidential candidate. So if Biden were the candidate and Biden won, they would be able to order him around and he'd have very little latitude from his own brainstem. They like puppets. So I think as far as the Democrats go, it's like, who's the most workable puppet? Because the globalists are in control. It's really, yeah, there is an effect. You make good points that nobody wanted the role because the country's going to be a mess. But that also means that no one wanted the role to be a Reconstruction president. And I think Trump doesn't mind that role, or he might find it salivating to do a Reconstruction job. I don't think he's going to get it done in the next 4 years. I think people in 2023 are going to be a little disappointed that we haven't had too much progress, but I think we're going to have some. Yeah. I think we're actually, this is going to be a wild point, but I think we're going to have some resignations in the Congress. People have been captured.
I hope so. Gentlemen, I want to thank you guys all for great commentary tonight as we close out this live stream, and for the live stream listeners for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been a great broadcast tonight. We appreciate your support again. thegadfly.mcn.com. I just muffled that up completely. That's not the right site. thegadfly.vhx.tv, and then also Rogue News. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for a great broadcast. And we'll talk to you everyone real soon. And stay tuned. It's going to be an interesting night. So take care, everyone. Be safe.